I was half asleep in our bed when she spoke softly to me. It was a little louder than a whisper, barely louder than the rain outside. I almost disregarded what she said altogether as I was peacefully slipping off into a satisfying slumber. But then, a few seconds after the words left her mouth and hung in the air, I finally heard her. It nearly shook me awake. "What did you just say, Claire?" In the darkness, I heard her take a deep breath and sigh sadly. Her hand slowly reached next to her and turned the switch on the bedside lamp, cascading our bedroom with light. Then she turned over and laid on her back. Her eyes stared at the ceiling above us, avoiding mine altogether. "I'm unhappy, Frank," she repeated quietly, as if she regretted having to say it. "Unhappy." That got my attention. That word, spoken in a soft, reluctant tone, is always part of a deeper message. It is never just a word that comes alone. It is like a scout, scoping out the territory to see if it is vulnerable for attack. It will soon be accompanied by an army, ready to devastate the land. "You're unhappy? What does that mean?" I rolled over to face her, to get a good look at my wife. I saw her eyes start to glisten with unshed tears. She didn't back at me. Her stare stayed fixed on the ceiling above. "I'm not happy. With us. With you. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," is a famous aphorism that kids say. Most of us have used it at some time in our childhood when another kid tried to torture us in verbal warfare. The truth is, that phrase is used as a balm to cover the hurt that words actually cause us. It makes us feel like the words never touched us. But if the words never touched us, we would never feel the need to say it. The words that Claire just said to me touched me, like a sharp blade touches soft skin. Tears started welling up in her eyes and slipping down her cheek. She still wasn't looking at me, but I was staring intently at her. The face that I'd found so beautiful for the past 11 years was filled with such agonizing pain at this moment. I would have felt the need to comfort her if the pain in my heart didn't eclipse anything that she felt at the moment. "You are unhappy being married to me? Is that what you're saying?" She didn't answer me. She just sniffled. But her silence and the fact that she didn't recant her words spoke volumes. I don't think there is a way to aptly describe the torrent of agony that consumes you when the person that you thought you'd grow old with tells you that she isn't happy being with you. "Why are you unhappy?" I asked, trying to remain calm, but the cracks in my voice betrayed that. In truth, I was on the verge of breaking down at any moment. Tears continued to stream down her face and into her pillow. She was still looking up at the ceiling and avoiding my eyes. "I don't know, Frank. I just am." "You don't know why you're unhappy? That sounds like bullshit, Claire." I spit at her. I was beginning to let the pain give way to anger, which was much easier to control and redirect. I saw her flinch at my words as more tears started to fall. She didn't say anything more. "So, what does this mean? You want to leave me? To leave us? Huh? Is that what you're trying to tell me?" Silence. I actually expected her to burst out and vehemently deny wanting to leave me, to claim that she still loved me, but just needed to work through some things. But she didn't. She let the silence answer for her. I don't know if any words could have hurt as much as her silence anyway. Like there was nothing left to say. I answered the stab to my heart with venom and rage. I snatched the comforter off and jumped out of bed like it was on fire. Claire finally turned her head and looked at me. "Frank, please try to understand." "Understand what, Claire? That my wife doesn't love me anymore and wants to leave me? I think I understand perfectly. I never said that I didn't love you, Frank. I just said that I was unhappy." I knew backpedaling when I heard it. I wasn't letting her off the hook. "So, you want to stay married to me?" She hesitated a moment, like she was searching for the right words to say. However, the only right words were the ones that said she wanted to stay married to me. She shouldn't have had to search for those words. Any response but an immediate one is the wrong answer. "I don't know what I want." That was all that she came up with. We just looked at each other. The only thing that was between us was 1,000 unsaid words. The memories of our lives, our children, our love seemed to fade into the ether as the new reality descended on us. At least that is what it felt like to me. It seemed like this reality was already present for her, and had been for a while. "Yes, you do. You want a divorce," I said after a moment of nothingness. The words choked in my throat, like they didn't want to come up. She didn't answer me, but she didn't really need to. It seemed like she was saying so much with so little words. It actually laughed a little when I thought that this was the most efficient use of words that I'd ever seen. Efficiency is getting the most of what you can using as little resources as possible. "Hey, I'm an engineer. Had been for the past 13 years, though many would argue that I was one at birth. Solving problems and making things work is in my blood. Even at a time like this, I can make connections that relate to building something or improving performance. My snort of laughter threw her off a bit. She cautiously got out of bed and slowly walked over to where I was. "Honey," she started as she reached out for me in an attempt to comfort me. It seemed more like she was trying to placate me, soften the blow of her world-shattering revelation. Like anything she said or did would make things better. I stepped back away from her. I wasn't in the mood to ease her guilt. "Don't call me that. You don't get to call me honey after you tell me that you want to leave me, Claire." She gulped and retracted her hands, once again avoiding my gaze. "I didn't say that. I'm just trying to explain, Frank. Do you, or don't you, want to be married to me? That needs no explanation. That's a yes or no question. So answer it. One word. Yes or no." "Frank, just let me. Yes or no?" I interrupted her. In my mind, any explanation that she could give needs to come only after she gives that answer. But she didn't answer. She sat there, looking at me with tears in her eyes. "That tells me everything I need to know. You don't have to say it. The fact that you won't say yes can only mean no. Tell me I'm wrong." More silence. "You know what? I'm tired. I worked 11 hours today with no lunch break. I don't need any explanation about why you suddenly want to leave me, why you're so unhappy. I need sleep. So I'm going to the couch in my office to get some much-needed rest. We'll talk about this tomorrow." Her face changed suddenly. It morphed from a sullen woman to an angry banshee. She found her voice that was so absent moments ago. "Screw you, Frank." She exploded. Her response was so startling that I was taken off guard. She was peering into my eyes with a look of determination and frustration. "I know you spent 11 hours today at work. You want to know what you did when you came home tonight? More work. You shut yourself in your office like you do every night. Now you can't even be bothered to talk to me about why I'm unhappy. You're saying that you want to leave me. What more is there to talk about?" "That's not what I said." "You didn't deny it either, Claire. Don't mince words with me. Say what it is that you want." "You want to know what I want? I'll tell you. I want to feel loved. I want a man who wants me around, who wants to be around me. I want to feel sexy with a man who thinks that I'm sexy. That is what I want. And I don't make you feel that? Is that what you're saying?" She once again fell silent. I wasn't going to let her off that easily anymore. "Goddamn it, Claire. Answer me." Something hit me suddenly. I don't know where it came from, but it was there. A revelation of sorts. A moment when things became illuminated for me. She didn't say that she wanted me to make her feel sexy. She said that she wants a man who makes her feel that way. Does someone else make you feel that way? I choked out. Her face gradually fell until she just broke down in tears. Then she covered her face in her hands. "Yes," she said softly in between sobs. The anger and venom that was there a moment ago was no longer in her voice. Now it was just sadness. My world stopped. Everything in me ceased living. I didn't respond to that. I couldn't. I just sat there and watched her cry. "Who?" I asked finally. No answer. Just more crying. "Who?" I yelled out, jarring her a little. She hiccuped in surprise, and then wiped her tears. "Doug," she said softly. "It's Doug. Doug, my ex-best friend." How cliché is that? Can words even describe what you feel in that moment? There are no adjectives that can aptly explain it. No one can come up with any poetic metaphors that can accurately paint a picture of the depths of despair that you sink to when you find out that your wife and your best friend had betrayed you. Both chose someone else over you. To make matters worse, they chose each other. This magnifies the betrayal tenfold. The pain that is a result of that betrayal is also magnified. Pain. That's the only word that fits. No other can suffice. Even its synonyms fail to match what this knowledge does to you. I wanted to respond, but I couldn't. There was so much to say, yet all of it meant nothing. So many questions flooded to my mouth, along with accusations, threats, and simple words like cheating bitch and 304. But nothing came out. I did the only thing I could do. I left. I just stomped out of the room and left her there as I descended the stairs to my impromptu bedchambers in my office, which was located next to the living room. I closed the door with a slam, shutting myself in. I momentarily basked in the safety of solitude. But that safe feeling was a fallacy, because I wasn't truly alone. The pain had accompanied me. I heard footsteps descending the stairs, and I knew that it was Claire following me. I quickly got up and locked the door to my office. I couldn't speak to her. I didn't trust myself. I had never hit her, but tonight threatened to shatter that record. This lock was protecting both of us from me. The doorknob rattled as she tried to open the door. When she failed, she knocked persistently while she called out my name. I continued to ignore her, still not trusting myself. The pain was speaking to me, telling me to do horrible things to her. It was painting horrific pictures in my head of my wife, intertwined with Doug. The moans, the laughs, the sex. She finally gave up with a sigh after about 10 minutes and went back upstairs. I was finally blessed with peace and quiet, so I tried to make the most of it by getting the sleep I so desperately needed. Unfortunately, getting that much-needed rest was easier said than done. The couch was comfortable enough, and not at all unfamiliar. I'd fallen asleep on this thing many nights when I had a problem that I had to solve, and didn't want to keep Claire up. The problem that I was having now was that my mind just wouldn't be quiet. I was plagued with thoughts of my wife falling out of love with me, and in love with Doug. The realization that she didn't want a life with me kept looping over and over. When did this happen? Worse still, how did I miss the signs? My mind thought back, playing and replaying interactions that I'd had with my wife. I was trying to find a point in time when the love started to fade. A moment that things began to shift. There has to be something. Scanning our years together, I couldn't find anything. Nothing monumental enough to explain how we'd gotten so off track. Everything had been the same as it had always been. In stories like this, usually the man can go back and see a pattern of the wife declining sex and affection. However, with us there was no declining sex life. We still made love a couple of times a week. I mean, sure, there were no fireworks or anything like that, but that's normal, right? There was a time when we were crazy kids, newlyweds who couldn't stand to be apart for a single moment. But life changes people. Relationships mature. Priorities change. That's life. My question was, when had Doug weaseled his way into the mix? I'd known Doug for nearly 13 years. He was my friend before I met and married Claire. At one time we worked for the same company. In fact, we both started working there together. There are outgoing people who are popular everywhere they go. They can make friends at the drop of a dime. I wasn't like that. I don't make many friends. In fact, for me to even call someone a friend is a leap. Doug was my friend. Claire was my wife who was also my friend. Emphasis on was. It wasn't that I was socially inept. It's just that I don't meet many people that I have that kind of connection with. I have work associates that I'm fond of. My assistant Sarah, for example, is one person who's been very instrumental to my life. I admire her and find her refreshing to be around. But still, even with all of that, I wouldn't consider her a friend. I was an only child growing up. I learned to get along without needing daily contact with other people. That independence followed me into adulthood. But not needing many friends doesn't mean that a person doesn't want any. Like I said, Doug and I once worked side by side. We were working together for years before I was promoted and became his boss. There wasn't any jealousy or anything. At least not as far as I could tell. We still occasionally hung out when we could. Unfortunately, my promotion came at the cost of a drastic reduction of my free time. Our friendship still strived, but it definitely took a hit. I wasn't really aware of how much of a hit it took until tonight. The strain became even greater when he was offered a job with another company. It came with a promotion for him, so it was a no-brainer as to whether or not he would take it. I was happy for him, but sad to see him go. One thing about Doug was that he wasn't like me when it came to engineering. He was smart as hell, but he wasn't as dedicated to his job as I was. He enjoyed making good money, as did I, but he didn't find the same joy in building that I found. For him, it was just a job. He was able to do it and go home. When he left the lab and went home, he didn't even like talking about work. Me, I was the opposite. I loved building things that were already built. I loved figuring them out so I could make them better. Even when I was out with my wife and kids at family gatherings or restaurants, I found time to doodle small impromptu schematics on napkins and other things. Doug and I were interns when we started. I was accepted for a year-long internship that only had 12 slots. When the internship was over, there were 2 open jobs available. May the best man or woman win. I instantly liked Doug, and I don't like many people. I felt a kinship with him. During our internship, we helped each other out. Each have weeded out the competition until we were the last 2 standing. I would love to say that we did it ethically, but I'd be lying. When you are competing for a job that starts out at $80K a year, good guys really do finish last. Don't let Disney tell you any different. There was one intern who was a threat to us. His name was Donald. It was down to us 3. Since there were only 2 jobs available, we knew there was a chance that one of us wouldn't make it. Donald was smarter than both of us, and we needed him gone. In fact, he had a design for a propulsion system that would have certainly knocked one of us out of the race. So we stole it. We got him drunk one night under the guise of friendship, stole his designs, emailed it to Doug, and sabotaged his laptop to be sure that he didn't save it anywhere else on it. Then, we took every CD and flash drive in his room, hoping against hope that we got any backups. The plan was to make sure he couldn't wow anyone with his design. Then, once we were assured that he was safely out of the way, Doug would email his schematics back to him. It worked. Without his designs, he didn't have a leg up on us. Better still, he threw a hissy fit and disqualified himself. He attacked us in full view of everybody, while Doug and I played the innocent victims. After Donald was gone, there were no questions as to who got the 2 job slots. I met Claire after I'd finished my internship and had been officially working for the company for a year. Doug and I had been friends at this point for 2 years. I won't get into how we met or give ad nauseum details about our courtship. It seems irrelevant at this point. We met, I thought she was beautiful, asked her out, and we married a year later. Had been married for the past 10 years. We even have 2 girls. Stacy, 8, and Kelly, 5. Doug was over my house more than his own. I wouldn't go as far as to say that he was a permanent fixture, but if I woke up in the morning and saw him going through my refrigerator, I would simply ask him if he made coffee. Thinking about Doug coming over to my house did put more puzzle pieces together. He started coming over less and less. I couldn't exactly tell you the time frame of when things began to slow down. I wasn't even thinking about it at the time to take notice. If I had to give a guesstimation, I would say that it started a little over 6 months ago. His appearance at my house started to become sparse. He didn't act any differently with me. He just stopped coming by as unexpectedly. Is that somehow connected? The clock above my desk ticked away the seconds. Those seconds turned into minutes, which seamlessly morphed into hours. Time seemed irrelevant, like its span was infinite, yet it passed within the blink of an eye. Before I knew it, sunlight was trying to fight its way through the curtains. I'd literally not slept a wink all night. I groaned as I contemplated getting up to go to the bathroom. I finally decided that if I didn't go now, the choice could possibly be taken out of my hands. I finally gave in to nature and trudged to the bathroom. When I was done, I went back to my office and thought about calling in sick. I wasn't in any type of mood to work today. I just slipped back underneath the blanket when I heard my alarm going off upstairs. It would have awakened me and told me that it was time to start my day had I been sound asleep in the warmth of my own bed, next to my wife. I heard it stop suddenly, which let me know that Claire had silenced it. I laid there, not sure what was to come next. Then I heard rustling around upstairs, followed by her footsteps on each stair as she descended them. A few seconds later, there was a knock on the door. "Frank, are you awake?" I choose to ignore her. Immature, I know, but I wanted her to go away. So I feigned sleep, smashing my face into the cushion. I heard the door creak open and listened to her step inside of my office. I mentally kicked myself for leaving it unlocked when I got back from the bathroom. "Frank, I know you're awake. I've laid next to you for 10 years. I know how you look when you're sleeping. Why do you want Claire?" I asked, the pillow obstructing my mouth somewhat. I didn't even turn to face her. "Just checking on you. I was worried about you." I snorted at that. She was worried about me. After she ripped my heart out of my chest, she was worried about me. "I'm fine. Go away." I didn't hear retreating footsteps, which meant that the bitch was still standing there. Half of me wanted to find something heavy to launch at her. The other half just wanted to ignore her. "Frank, we need to talk about this. I think things got all messed up last night." I finally sat up and turned to her. She looked like she hadn't any more luck catching that elusive creature called sleep than I did. I took a strange comfort in that. "What things got messed up, Claire? You've been cheating on me with my best friend, and now you want to leave me. That is the gist of it, isn't it?" "Frank, do you want to be married to me, Claire?" "Huh." She started to fidget nervously. "It's not that simple, Frank. Forgive me, but I couldn't for the life of me find a simpler question. It didn't even require an explanation. All it needed was a yes or no response. What the hell is complex about it, Claire? Either you want to be Mrs. Underwood, or you don't. How much simpler could it be? If you just let me explain." The tiny footsteps of Kelly and Stacy were heard coming down the stairs, putting this conversation on hold. A silent message of, "We'll finish this later," passed between us as we greeted our girls and began the morning ritual of preparing them for their day. We didn't speak any more about the humongous elephant in the room, at least not with words. We glanced at each other over our daughters' heads, trying to gauge the other's mindset. But soon the responsibilities of the day put that conversation further on hold as we began to make our preparations to conquer the world. As if on autopilot, our family showered, dressed, and parted ways for the day. I decided to go to work. I didn't want to be alone with Claire once the girls left for school. Not yet. That conversation could wait. As I drove over to my job, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. Add that to the lack of sleep that I was suffering from, and one could say that today was prepping to be a shitty day. However, once I pulled into my parking space at my job, all other things ceased. Claire faded into the background. I felt nothing from my sleep deprivation. Suddenly, my mind burst into formulas about our current engine problems. My company was on the verge of creating a new kind of engine. It would have significantly more productivity than its predecessors. The horsepower would be increased drastically, but it would be able to do so at greater fuel efficiency. Our company stood to make a lot of money on this project. The only problem was we were on the verge of getting it perfect, but not close enough. In the end, the engine failed every test. I mentally made a note of the calibrations that would have to be made. Thomas, my intern, met me by the door with a fresh cup of coffee like he did every morning, just waiting to kiss my butt and show me why he was smarter than the rest of the interns. I like Thomas because he reminds me of myself when I was an intern. Mr. Underwood, glad you're here. I have some thoughts on why the engine is failing. I tried to call you last night, but your wife said that you couldn't be disturbed. I left a message for you with her, but you never returned my call. Did you get it? The last thing I needed was to think about Claire right now. I needed to stay focused. Even the mention of her name set off ripples in my pond. Doesn't matter, Thomas. I'm here now. What's the situation? Well, I was trying to explain to your wife. Stop throwing rocks in my pond, Thomas. That the new engine keeps failing because there are things that we didn't account for. We keep trying to compensate, but nothing is working. Increasing the output works for a while, but it keeps failing because we can't keep it cool enough. I think we need to focus less on raising the horsepower and more on finding another way to cool it. He beamed proudly, like he just solved the mystery for us. Stupid interns. I had to fight the urge to laugh at him. He was smart. Hell, he was practically a genius. But we all were. Top of his class, 4.0 average. Blah, blah, blah. That basically describes everyone here. You couldn't get in the door unless you had that at a minimum. There was nothing he could figure out that we hadn't already thought of. Still, you have to keep the interns motivated. We work the dog's head out of them for practically nothing, so you have to give them a cookie every once in a while. Good work, Thomas. We'll look into that theory. We're already looking into that. Had been for weeks. But no need to burst his bubble. Thomas once again smiled broadly, practically panting with his tongue out and wagging his tail. He enjoyed his doggy treat. I almost patted him on the head. Here are the new projected specs for today's trial runs. He handed me the paper with the latest readout. The numbers looked impressive. Of course, they always look impressive on paper. Okay, Thomas. Tell the others I'll be down to the lab in a second. He started to scurry down the hallway, but then he stopped and turned around. Boss, is everything okay at home? Mrs. Underwood sounded a little. Everything's fine. I cut him off abruptly. He looked at me with concern, but saw no room for discussion on my face. With the last rock removed from his hands, he silently accepted that any mention of the wife was off limits. He nodded his head and continued to head to the lab. I stopped by assistant's desk to see if I had any meetings scheduled. Sarah gave me a brief rundown of what I had to do. Everything was part of a standard day, except for a meeting that I had with the heads. That's what we call the big wigs, the ones who made all of the decisions for the company. The department heads needed constant reassurance of their importance to the company, so we provided it to them by giving them occasional progress reports on our projects. I always dreaded these meetings. Every one of them was an interrogation by the higher-ups, asking stupid questions that they really didn't want the answer to. They only wanted to hear that everything was perfect. If there wasn't any progress, they wanted to know why. But I couldn't tell them why without going into an explanation of the problems that we were trying to overcome. That explanation was a technical one, full of big words that they didn't care about. The only words that they knew about were words like profit margin and bottom line. Each time we had to go into development of a new product, this was the dance. We all knew it. We all hated it. After I had my day outlined for me, I thanked Sarah. She looked at me worriedly for a moment. Mr. Underwood, you okay? Damn it. I wished everyone would stop asking me that. I'm fine, Sarah. Just going through some things at home. I'll be fine. You want to talk about it? She asked, looking genuinely concerned. I didn't want to be a dick, especially not to her. But I absolutely did not want to talk about it. No, I said simply. It was abrupt, but it sent my message clearly. She read my tone, nodded her head briefly, and left it at that. I went about my day. I had the meeting with the heads, which went about as well as I thought it would. After that, I was back in the lab for the remainder of the day. And I mean that literally. It was dark outside when I finally punched in the code to unlock my car and pushed the start button. I barely heard the engine whir to life. It purred softly as my car beeped to let me know that I had to buckle my seatbelt. This is the way an engine is supposed to sound. Or not sound. I know that the manly man will tell you that loud, powerful muscle engines are what it's all about. Massive machines that bark and growl when they are stopped at a red light, causing all of the lesser cars to shrivel in their monstrous presence. One step of the gas pedal causes a screeching commotion as it is propelled forward, roaring loudly and leaving smoke and burnt rubber in its wake. But for me, that's not what it is about. I like luxury engines. The strong, silent type. The ones that can reach 100 miles per hour in seconds with barely a whisper. These cars don't need to announce their presence to the world. They just show up, shiny and sleek. Women get wet just sitting on the passenger side as the soft seats massage their buttocks. Muscle cars will get a guy's attention. Luxury cars will get a woman's attention. Have you ever seen an advertisement for an Aston Martin or a Tesla? Probably not. You don't need to know the price or what its stats are. If you do, then you are in the wrong place. Just being able to sit in one increases your status. A man's car is an extension of himself. Muscle cars are all about the show, showing the world how masculine you are. Luxury cars are all about the wealth. A person can buy a Mustang or a Challenger and park it right outside of his apartment. People who buy brand new BMWs, Porsches, etc. park them in their driveway. Most of the time, right next to their spouse's luxury car. That is what it is about. I know I sound superficial, but you have to understand. I didn't have money growing up. My dad was a mechanic. My mom worked at Walmart. We weren't broke by normal standards. But the high school that I went to was located in an area that was wealthy. These kids weren't quite private school rich, but most of them had at least one parent with a name accompanied by a brief description of their education, doctor, attorney at law, PhD, etc. These kids had material things that they took for granted. Their wardrobe consisted of expensive clothes made by gay men whose names were dropped with awe. Most of them were given cars on their 16th birthday. I'm not talking about a beater. I'm talking about cars that grown men with full-time jobs will probably never own. Any problem they ran into was fixed with a phone call to mommy and daddy. Me, I didn't have it like that. My clothes were ordinary. My first car was a Neon, and I worked at Best Buy for that. So while I wasn't poor, I might as well have been on welfare in comparison. My saving grace was that I was smarter than 95% of the school. The other 5% were paid to be there. I studied hard. I never made lower than AB, and even that was in gym. I worked my butt off because I swore that I would have the life that I was denied. My kids would be one of the envied. My kids. Just thinking about them made me remember what was waiting for me at home. My family. My wife. My unhappy wife. I drove home in morbid silence. No longer able to hide out behind work, I was forced to replay the conversation of last night. I didn't make Claire feel sexy, but someone else did. Doug did. I can't describe what I felt thinking about that. Last night I was full of anger and hurt. Now, a part of me was numb. I was feeling a bit detached. I'd spent all day at work avoiding it. I was no longer able to do that. The silence of my drive home forced me to dwell on it. Everything seemed sort of abstruse. I dreading the confrontation that awaited me, yet I needed it to happen. I didn't know what to expect when I walked through my front door. Would my wife be packed and ready to leave with her new lover? Would she be waiting with divorce papers? Would they be but naked and screwing on my living room couch? Or would she simply pretend like nothing happened? When finally walked through the front door of my house, it was sort of anticlimactic. The girls were eating cookies in the living room. Stacy was doing her homework, and Kelly was coloring in a book. My wife was sitting on the couch on her laptop. In front of them, our 65-inch TV idly showed an episode of SpongeBob. "Hi, Daddy," Stacy said as she briefly looked up from her homework. Kelly continued to concentrate on her coloring, like she was solving a complex calculus problem. Claire looked up from her laptop with a look of trepidation. She seemed to be trying to gauge my mood. "Hi, honey. How was work?" she asked in an attempt to sound normal. I'm guessing it was for the girl's sake, which was why I let the honey go for the moment. "It was work," I replied with no inflection. I was going to play along for now, but I wasn't going to pretend like nothing happened. She nodded slightly, as if she were accepting the terms of our ceasefire. "I made you a plate. It's in the microwave. It probably tasted better when it was warm, but you weren't here when we ate." I caught the tone in her voice when she said the last part. I wasn't here. Is that what she wanted to lead with? Was that her excuse for doing whatever she did with my best friend? Well, I had a long day at work. Have to make the money for my family. I returned. The look on her face was one of someone biting their tongue. She had a lot more to say. So did I. But we couldn't. not without alerting the girls. For now, our ceasefire prevented us from getting on with the war, but it was coming. So are we finally going to talk about this? Claire asked when the girls were in bed. I was sitting in my office going over things on my laptop. Her voice came from behind me. I swiveled my chair around until I was facing her standing in my doorway. Okay, fine, I said as I let out a breath. She entered and closed the door behind her. Then she found her way to the couch that was my temporary bed. I just want to start out by saying that I'm sorry. The last thing I want is to hurt you. It's just that things have been crazy for a while now. I don't know what to say. Why don't you start with telling me about you and Doug? I said with surprising calmness. Frank, I don't want to hear how sorry you are, or about how you didn't want to hurt me. That does nothing for me. If you want to help me, you need to start by talking. Now, tell me about your goddamn relationship with my ex-best friend. The anger was starting to rise. Strangely enough, I was a little relieved to feel it. For a minute, I felt like some emotionless robot. I was beginning to get worried. It started a year ago, she said, on the verge of tears. I leaned back in my seat, allowing her room to continue. I mean, Doug has always been there for me. So, I guess it started more than a year ago. But I didn't start looking at him like that until about a year ago. You were gone so much, especially after you got that promotion. I started to feel overwhelmed with having to do everything by myself. All of the nights you were gone, and the days that you just weren't available. She shot me an accusatory glance, but then looked away. Then she continued. Doug started helping me around the house, listening to me. He would come over just to talk. He was sweet. The bitch had the nerve to turn her lips up in a nostalgic smile, like the memories that she was reliving were sweet. The simmering anger in me started to heat up at that. Her voice switched back from sweet and wistful to hard and bitter. He even took me out a couple of times. Like the time you were supposed to take me out on my birthday, but forgot. Her eyes looked like steel at that point. Before that sentence, she looked sort of remorseful. But when she said that, she took on a defiant look. Now I was pissed. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You're right, Claire. I forgot your birthday. Well, you sure showed me. I forget your birthday. You screw my best friend. I guess that makes us even, right? We didn't have sex that night. For your information, that night was spent with me crying about how my husband never wants to be around me. He just listened. Do you hear that? He listened to me. So, tell me, when did listening turn into sex? If you want to use the "you forgot my birthday" defense as an excuse, then you have a long way to go to make that fly. She laughed incredulously as she stood up. You think this started because you forgot one birthday? How about anniversaries, date nights, get-togethers with friends, vacations that had to get canceled, or whatever else that got tossed to the side because it didn't have anything to do with an engine? How about all of the nights you were here, but not really here? She was practically looming over me, pointing at me as she spoke. Now the gloves were off. We were getting into our trenches and setting our attacks. You never answered the question. When did the screwing start? I don't know, Frank. Around April, I think. 6 months ago. Around the time Doug stopped coming by. There's that mystery solved. Where? Where did the screwing happen? In my bed? On the couch? In a hotel room? Yes, she responded simply. I didn't get the answer at first, but then I did. The screwing happened in all 3 places. Probably happened in many more. Do you love him? My voice cracked as I asked that. The feelings of hurt began to flow. The anger at her betrayal was nothing compared to the pain I was starting to feel once again. I was able to mask it for a while, hiding behind work and justified anger. But now, asking that question and needing to know the answer left me open. Tears began water my eyes. I don't know. I think so, she said reluctantly as she looked away from me. She knew what this was doing to me, and she felt bad about it. Do you still love me? Another question that left me vulnerable. Yes, but it's not the same. Not like it used to be. Not like I should love a husband. I finished for her. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. After that, we let the silence fall upon us. She walked back over to the couch and sat on it. So, what do we do now? She asked softly, breaking the cold quiet. All I could do was sigh and shake my head. What do you think we do? I asked harshly, pain filling my voice. I knew what she wanted. What she was really asking. She wanted me to make this okay. To give her my blessing to find happiness with Doug, or whatever she was going to do. But she wasn't going to get that. I was not going to make it easy for her. I refused to swallow the bile of rejection and suck it up just to clear her conscience. Screw her and the Doug she rode in on. You want to leave? You want to end this marriage? Fine. You do it. You go find a lawyer and serve me divorce papers. You move out of the house and find a shitty apartment. You explain to the kids why this family is breaking up. You take the initiative. I'm not doing a goddamn thing. You started this train wreck. You finish it. Frank. Don't Frank me. Screw you, Claire. What did you think I was gonna say? I hope you find happiness. I'm sorry for forgetting your birthday. I wish I could have been a better husband. What did you think would happen when you walked your cheating butt into this office? The words that I said stung her. They hit her right in the heart, just as they were intended to. Her face fell as more tears started to drop, but she held her chin up. With eyes glistening with tears, she looked at me and said, I didn't know what to expect, Frank. Maybe us having a talk, working through some things, figuring things out like adults. But honestly, I don't expect much from you anymore. Adults, you stinking bitch, don't talk about being adults. Adults talk when there is a problem. They don't go out of their marriage and open their legs for sex and then come back and say they are not happy. So, my dear beloved wife, you have nothing that covers your acts of cheating. Now get out of here before I start talking in a different language. A language that you may not like. With that final note, she disappeared from my office. If my life were anything like the stories, I would have been served papers the next day. Then there would be a brief few paragraphs about the term settlements. Then the next scene would flash by, and one of us would be moved out and getting on with our pathetic existence. If only it were that easy. Claire did find a lawyer about a week later. If you think the fact that she found a lawyer was painful for me, trying living with the knowledge that she was actively looking for one, watching her on her laptop with an intense stare on her face, scrolling through searches, and watching her stop at one and click. Then, moments later, she would shoot me an uncomfortable look and leave the room, grabbing her cell phone with her. I conceded to the fact that she was serious, and I began to search for a lawyer myself. It was Sarah, my assistant, who pointed me in the direction of Terrence Ross. Our company had a law firm on retainer, and he was the lawyer assigned us. He mostly kept us from getting sued and operating within this side of the law, at least on paper. He wasn't a divorce lawyer, but because he was part of a bigger firm, he could give some recommendations and talk to people on my behalf. That would get me someone who could help me. I made an appointment and met him at his office. Once his secretary announced my presence, he came out to greet me. Mr. Underwood, nice to see you. Please, come in and take a seat, he said as he shook my hand. He then guided me into his office and motioned me toward the chair in front of his massive desk. I took the seat. So, what brings us here today? He asked as he opened a notebook and took an expensive-looking pen from his desk. Well, Mr. Ross, my wife is filing for divorce. Or at least she's going to file. She just found a lawyer, so I'm sure that it is in the works. He nodded his head knowingly as wrote some things down. I see. Well, I recently went through a messy divorce myself. I know how it feels. I nodded. His face took on a look of pity, but something else was there too. He understood. So, tell me, was there infidelity? Abuse? Gambling problems? Yeah, I mean, no abuse or gambling. Infidelity. She cheated on me. Did she give a reason why she was unfaithful? I snorted a laugh. Said I worked too much and was never there for her. He also snorted a laugh and shook his head. Been there, done that. You work hard to give them the life of luxury, and it isn't enough. Honestly, I don't know what they want. They want a man who is successful, yet they want him to always be available to do every little thing they want. I sighed and nodded in agreement. It was nice to have someone understand what I was feeling. So, Mr. Ross, please call me Terry. Thank you, Terry. Feel free to call me Frank. Will do, Frank. So, I guess the only question that I have is, what do I do now? He sat back in his, and I swear an evil sneer came across his face. Kind of like when a shark smells blood. Well, off the top of my head, I will say that you need to get a list of your assets. I'm not telling you to hide the ones that you can, but I nodded as he continued. The ones that you don't will probably be split between the two of you. Like I said, I went through that not too long ago. But I think the most important thing you need to do is ask yourself what it is that you want out of this divorce. Do you want to annihilate her, or are you just looking to tactically separate and go separate ways? He seemed a little too enthusiastic about annihilating her. I guess that is what good lawyers are supposed to be like. Terry and the law firm that he worked for had been on my company's retainer for the longest. Terry was the lawyer they assigned to us for a reason. When our company came under fire, they sent him in. Problems had a tendency to disappear when he got involved. What are my choices? I asked him. He smiled broadly at me, like he was waiting for me to ask that. Well, Frank, as you know, I'm not a divorce lawyer. Mostly, I I keep your company from being sued, as well as handle other things that keeps them spit-shined and sparkly clean, avoiding things like patent infringement, code violations, things of that nature. But I know of some people who I can refer you to. Who I refer you to depends on what you want out of this. I can send you the Navy SEAL or the Marine. I don't understand, I said in confusion. He chuckled a bit, like he didn't expect me to understand. The Navy SEAL, as I like to call my colleague Mike, is a guy who accomplishes the mission. He doesn't kill anything more than what is necessary. One shot, one kill. He is the guy that you send in to resolve things peacefully with as little bloodshed as possible. He isn't afraid to get his hands dirty, but he makes as little noise as possible. Have you ever heard about the Navy SEALs in the news? You won't. The only team you've actually heard of was SEAL Team 6, and that was only because their target was so infamous. Americans needed to hear about Bin Laden's death. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't even know they existed. That is Mike. Get in. Finish the mission. Get out. He is so good that I've seen the opposing spouse actually thank him for being so nice, like he did them a favor. But in reality, he got his client the best deal possible. He just did it with a smile. Now Phil, he's a Marine. Marines are the dirty boys. They gut, kill, and annihilate all of those in their path. After they're done killing, they stick around to make sure it stays dead. They don't leave until the war is over, because the entire war is their mission. Phil will let you know that he is coming to screw you over, and then laugh at your corpse. His first tactic is go for the jugular. There is no lead up to it, no progression. I have never heard of a pleasant divorce where he is concerned. I could only nod and wait for him to continue. Both are good for their purposes. Neither one is better than the other. They just have different missions. Now, if you want someone to resolve the situation, do it neatly and not scorch the earth doing it. I can get you Mike. But if you want to send your wife crawling away with bloody stumps, then I can send you to Phil. He seemed to enjoy his analogy. It was probably one that he'd given many times before. However, no matter how much Claire hurt me, I didn't like the image of her crawling away with bloody stumps. I'm not sure what I want right now. I guess that depends on her, I said finally. He took a breath as he eyed me with a sort of pity. Okay, Frank, I get it. Believe me when I tell you, ending a marriage is hard. I've been there. His eyes glazed over for a second, as if he were remembering his own battle. But he shook it off quickly. Just remember that there is a difference between being patient and procrastinating. In cases like divorce, usually the one who isn't scared to strike first is the one who ends up getting what they want. When my ex-wife Christine decided that she wanted a divorce, I sat around, hoping that she would change her mind. I started trying to win her back. I sent her flowers, jewelry, poems, the works. But she was determined. In the end, I was unprepared, and she took me to task. If you won't wait around to see if she goes with her own SEAL or the Marine, you may find yourself at a disadvantage like I did. Don't wait too long before you decide. I thanked him and shook his hand as I prepared to leave. He walked me to the door of his massive office and ushered me out, handing me his card as I left. Call me when you decide. Good luck, he said as he patted me on the back. I left his office, feeling worse than I did when I entered. When I placed the divorce on Claire's side of the court, I put the entire burden of it on her. If I'm being honest, I secretly hoped that she would realize that she didn't want it. But watching her actually seeking counsel with such fervor made me realize how much she really wanted to be done with me. Now, sitting on the precipice of my own decision, everything seemed so morose. Did she love me at all? Had she ever loved me? For me, sitting in that office, speaking with Terry about how much bloodshed I wanted to end my marriage with was torture. It made me pause and really think about what I was doing to my marriage. Claire didn't seem to be suffering from the same hesitancy. She was full steam ahead. I do recognize the valiant effort on her part to not be a complete bitch about it, but she had no qualms within herself about what she was doing. Her only obstacle was how it was going to affect me. She wanted this divorce. She wanted to be rid of me. What were my options? Try to win her back? Quit my job? Or start doing the things that my engineer brain is telling me to do? The next logical step: hiding assets, protecting my investments, preparing for the inevitable. My brain was giving me a to-do list that was of the utmost importance, but I couldn't shake the last vestibule of hope. That is what kept me from making a decision in there. By waiting for her next move instead of taking the initiative myself, I was leaving room for her to change her mind. I didn't want to do anything to exacerbate the situation any more than I should. If she were on the fence in any way, I didn't want my actions to push her over. Hope. It is the quintessential human delusion, simultaneously the source of your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. The Architect, Matrix Reloaded. Isn't that the truth? The following morning, I walked into the bedroom we used to share to look for clothes to dress for work. I was moving around quietly as to avoid waking Claire. As I was dressing, I took a moment to look at my wife, and my heart nearly dropped. It fell into my pants. Claire slept in only a t-shirt. She'd always done this. How had I not realized how beautiful she was? How had it slipped my notice, night after night, that I had this desirable woman lying next to me with only a few pieces of material separating us from carnal pleasure? My God, as I stood there, looking at her laying on her stomach, breathing softly as she slept while the short t-shirt rode high enough on her waist, I was speechless. It's funny, Claire and I hadn't really had a steamy sexual relationship for the longest time, even before she started getting it from Doug. But now, when facing the prospect of never being able to touch her again, I ached to touch her. This is what I was losing on the brink of losing, what I took for granted all of these years. Suddenly, I wanted my wife like I hadn't wanted her in a long time. I got near her and touched her waist, and then suddenly she said, "Yes, Doug. Yes." I have never gone from fully aroused to completely turned off in a matter of seconds before this moment. Have you ever rapidly cooled white-hot metal before? When metal is hot to the point of glowing white, it can be manipulated easier. Applying pressure will bend it to any shape that it is willed. But once it gets super cooled, it is solid, unbendable. The only thing pressure will do at this point is break it. That is what happened to my heart. It was super cooled. The excitement that I was feeling at the possibility of making love to my wife was instantly turned into a sick, gut-wrenching, agonizing awareness. It literally felt like a sharp, piercing stab to my chest. The bond that my heart had to this false hope was finally broken. I had lost her. My marriage was over. The only thing left was a heart that broke under the pressure. With tears in my eyes, I left the room. I think she tried to call out to me, but I wasn't listening. I ran into the safety of my office, slammed the door shut, and cried hard. The body shaking kind of crying, where your entire soul is open. "Frank, I'm sorry. I was half asleep. I didn't realize." I heard from the doorway. I turned to find my wife standing there, looking at me with pain in her eyes. I didn't even realize that she'd come in. "Get out! Get out!" I yelled at her as I pushed her out and slammed the door in her face. I went out straight to Doug, and once I reached, I ran to his front door. I hammered on the front door of the condo like I was the police here for a raid. "Doug, get out of here, you backstabbing scumsucker." Neighbors began to peek out of their windows and crack open their doors to see what the commotion was about. I didn't give a shit about them, though. I had only one objective: to ram my fist into Doug's face as many times as it took to make myself feel better. After having my wife call out his name while she was sleeping, he might be dead by the time I felt better. I heard my cell phone ring. I looked at the display and saw that it was Claire. Calling to save your lover? Figures he'd call you to save him. Well, screw you and screw him. Claire's desperate voice blared through my earpiece. "No, Frank. I'm calling to save you. Doug called the cops. They are on their way over there right now to arrest you. If you don't want to go to jail, leave. Think about your girls." This bitch had the audacity to lecture me about thinking about my girls. After everything that led me to this shit-stain's front door, she felt the need to make me think rationally about what my actions would do to the family. Really? I hope you realize the irony of you telling me to think about what I'm doing to this family. Eat shit, Claire. She sighed impatiently. Well, at least think about what going to jail could mean for your security clearance. You know how fidgety those guys are, Frank. Going to jail could have you under the microscope for months. How is that going to affect your job? She was right. Hell, I couldn't lose my job over this. My marriage was already toast. I wasn't willing to lose the only thing that kept me sane right now. My silence made her laugh sardonically. Right. Do the right thing for your job, if not your family. At least you know what's important. Claire, go to hell. And take your boyfriend with you. I said as I hung up on her. I made my way to my car, but I still had one last thing to say to my ex-best friend. This isn't over, Doug. Do you hear me, you backstabbing a-hole? As I sped away, tears threatened to flood my eyes once again. Screw this. I wasn't going to cry over this shit. I was tired of hoping, praying to some apathetic deity that he would wake my wife up and make her love me. She wants Doug, not me. I saw her face on the screen of my phone a few more times, indicating that she was trying to call me. I ignored every last one of them. She was the last person I wanted to talk to right now. As I sped around a corner, completely ignoring the stop sign, I saw something move in front of me. My brain focused to a reality that stopped my breath. In front of me was a mother and her child walking across the street, and I was speeding toward them. I slammed on my brakes and watched their faces turn to masks of horror. They froze, right there in front of me, paralyzed by fear. My tires screeched loudly as they gripped the pavement. Please God, no. Somewhere must have heard me, because my car lurched to a stop with a few inches to spare. The mother's face turned from a panicked woman on the verge of death to a maniacally crazed woman. Are you crazy? You almost killed me. What is your problem? She carried on for a minute, but I was thankful that her kid was there. I could tell she was tempering her language for his sake. Still, the venom in her voice could not be hidden. No amount of apologizing would calm her. I guess telling someone that you're sorry for almost mowing her and her child down with 2 tons of steel does seem a bit insignificant. We parted ways and I drove somewhere, cautiously, to park. I wasn't in any condition to drive. My nerves were all over the place. My mind was a jumbled mess, filled with intertwining thoughts of pain, revenge, rage, and betrayal. I wasn't myself. I was someone else. I'm normally a logical person, always prepared, always with a plan. Not this guy, running to that a-hole's house, calling him out like bully on the playground after school. That wasn't me. I needed to get my head on straight. It was time to accept the facts. My marriage was over. Cap it. There was no saving us. No hope for redemption. It was time for me to pull the trigger, take it out of her hands, and put the ball back into my court. I was done. I fished the intricately designed card out of my wallet. The address to his office, his phone number, and a brief quote was superimposed over a picture of a stern-looking Terry. He looked every bit the bulldog that he was. After I punched his number into my phone, I waited for an answer. The pleasant-sounding secretary greeted me, letting me know that I'd reached Terrence Ross' office. Once she put me through to him, I only said one thing. Send me the Marine. Frank, what happened? Terry asked with concern in his voice. Who cares what happened? Send me the goddamn Marine. I want that bitch's entrails to be scattered all over the place. My voice was deadpanned, yet filled with venom and anger, if that were possible. Like a serial killer trying to explain to his victim why he was doing what he was doing. There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought that I hung up on him. Terry? Yeah, I'm here, Frank. Tell me what happened. I sighed in despair, the emotion finding its way to my voice. She called out the a-hole's name. When we were about to make love, she called out his name. Saying the words out loud only made me feel more humiliated. I was the one who was touching her, and she yells his name out? Listen, Frank, a lot has happened and you need to process it. Your emotions are high. Why don't you go to a hotel? Don't even go back home to pack. You need to get away from her for a moment and clear your head. I was silent on my end. He heard my lack of response and felt that he had a little more convincing to do. Now is not the time to make decisions, Frank. I've seen this play out time and time again. Trust me, it doesn't end well for anybody, least of all the kids. Why would you ask me if I wanted the Navy SEAL or Marine, Terry? Why give me the choice to annihilate the bitch in the first place if you were going to chicken out on me? I spit out in anger. Terry took a deep breath. Listen, Frank, had you wanted the assassin from the jump, I would have given you his number in a heartbeat. But your hesitancy shows me that you care about what happens to your wife after this is all over. The fact that you made such a drastic change in so short a time period means that your head is not thinking right. Decisions made on the verge of these circumstances are always regretted. Trust me. I was starting to calm down and see reason. He was right. The last thing I wanted, despite my current mood, was to turn this into a war zone with collateral damage, namely my kids. No matter what Claire thought of me, I did love my girls. I didn't want to make this any worse for them than it had to be. Still, I wanted that bitch and her boyfriend to pay. They deserved retribution for what they did to me. What do I do, Terry? I'm dying here. I'm laying here with my heart shattered into a million pieces, and they are acting like I'm the one in the wrong. What do I do? I laid my head on the steering wheel and sat there for a moment, feeling the pain. My world was spinning out of control, and I had nothing to latch onto. That is the worst feeling for a person who is always in control. Tell you what, I heard his voice break through. I'm going to do something completely unethical here. I'm going to text you an address. You are going to meet me there. You need a drink, maybe even something else. I don't think so, Terry. Frank, this isn't open for discussion. I can be there in about 15 minutes. I'll have a table all ready for us by the time you get there. See you soon. With that, he cut the connection, like there was nothing else to talk about. 2 minutes later, my phone chimed with a message. At the Mario's Gentleman Lounge. Is he serious? A strip club? My life has been ripped up by the roots. My sense of self is in question. And he thinks that a lap dance is supposed to make me feel better? What can I do for you, sweetie? A woman with glittery makeup asked me in a sultry voice that just dripped with lust and sex after I'd made the decision to step inside of the club. In fact, her entire body was glittery. Even her full lips, which were bright red, sparkled under the lights. The only clothes that she had on were panties that consisted of a paper-thin strip of material in the front and dental floss that ran between her butt cheeks in the back. Even with the mood I was in, I couldn't help but to take notice to how beautiful she was. Smooth, flawless skin, flat stomach, and curvy hips. Shit, even her feet were sexy. I'm here to meet a friend. Actually, he's my lawyer. Well, not my lawyer, but... I was stammering, I know. I took a deep breath and calmly said, I'm here to meet a man named Terry, or Mr. Ross. The beautiful woman giggled and placed her hand in the middle of my chest to calm me down. Her smile was infectious. I knew that I was making a fool of myself. It wasn't my first time seeing a naked woman, but being here in this environment had me a little out of sorts. You're Frank. I'm Starlet. Terry told me to watch out for you. He's in the VIP section. He wanted me to bring you to him when you arrived. I breathed a sigh of relief that I could stop talking. She casually waved her finger, indicating that I was to come with her. Follow me, sugar. The beautiful goddess led the way, her shapely hips bouncing from side to side as she walked. I couldn't help but to stare. I was so mesmerized that I didn't even realize that she stopped walking until I nearly bumped into her. Oh God, I'm sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going. She giggled once again. It's okay. It's nice to know that you were admiring me so much that you forgot how to walk. I didn't wear these panties because I wanted you to act like a gentleman. She watched in amusement as I stuttered for a response. When I didn't come up with one, she continued. The VIP section is right up these stairs. She said as she pointed to a narrow hallway that housed a staircase. The sign above it said champagne room. As we go up, I fully expect your eyes on my hips. I will be highly offended if they aren't. Am I clear? I couldn't help but to smile at her. Yes, ma'am, I said with a fake salute. She smiled seductively and winked at me as she led me up the stairs. She took each one slowly, purposefully. Her heels clacked every time they made contact with the wood, and her toned calves flexed with each step as we ascended into the upper room. I did my best not to offend her. There he is. Terry yelled loudly as he lifted his glass to greet me when I walked into room. He was surrounded by several beautiful women. Unlike the downstairs, which was stuffed full of leering men and drunken a-holes, this area was close to being secluded. The flashing lights of main section weren't found up here. The lighting was now soft and intimate. The booming music was replaced with smooth jazz. Starlet took me by the hand and led me over to Terry. It was an intimate gesture, walking hand in hand. Her touch sent chills throughout me. I see you've met Starlet, he said as he smiled broadly as we approached. I sheepishly nodded. Yeah, we've met. She answered for me. Frank and I are good friends. Aren't we, Frank? She asked playfully. The best. I was able to get out. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that the sarcasm that I intended made it through. She laughed and bumped me with her shoulder. Well, good. Sit, Frank. Sit, he said as he pointed to a chair across from him. I sat in the indicated seat. A strip club? I wouldn't think a lawyer would take his client to a strip club. Well, first of all, you're not my client. I'm not representing you in any open cases. You're a friend. However, I think it would still be best if we never speak about this after tonight. I nodded in understanding. Secondly, he continued, I need to clear your head, distract you for a bit with a little misdirection. You are about to make a monumental decision, and you need to be clear-headed. But we'll speak about that in a little bit. For right now, enjoy the lovely entertainment of these gorgeous young ladies. Now, which one would you like a dance from first? I looked at Starlet, and her eyes met mine. I didn't say anything for a moment, but my message was clear. Good choice, she said as she gently grabbed my hand and led me to a secluded corner of the room. Once we had some privacy, relatively speaking, she sat me down in a chair. Then she straddled me, wrapped her arms around the back of my neck, and sat down, right in my lap. She smelled so good, like flowers. Her glittery skin added to her aura of seduction. She was a perfect sex angel. This your first lap dance? She asked in a soft voice. I was finding it hard to concentrate with her legs spread across me. Yeah, that obvious? I asked nervously, trying to sound calm. I tried to look at her, but I had to turn my head. She was peering right at me, practically looking through me. Her eyes were focused on my face. It was intense. You were good at this, I said, trying to loosen the tension. She smirked at me and gave a little giggle. I haven't even started yet, sweetie. I was waiting for the next song to start, but I'm glad you're warmed up for me. She gave a little bounce. I like you, Frank. I like you too. I can tell, she laughed. I had to laugh with her. I felt so at ease with her, so relaxed. The two of us were lost in our own world. My nerves faded, and I allowed my hands to roam freely. Having a woman like Starlet grinding her soft skin up against you is cathartic. Let no one tell you differently. Any man who doesn't momentarily forget his troubles in that instance is too far gone in his misery to be saved. I know that Terry's intent was for me to sample the other girls, but I was just fine with Starlet. She was the hottest one in this club. About an hour later, Terry cleared the girls out of the room and put his business face on. Now that your mind is clear, let's talk. I want you to think about what it is that you want from all of this. After the dust settles, what can you live with? If you go nuclear, you need to be sure it's what you want. I nodded as I took a sip of the stale, warm beer that had been sitting out for a little while now. I don't know. I guess I want what's fair. But most of all, I want my kids to not be damaged by all of this. You know? He smiled knowingly and patted me on the back. I looked up at the ceiling and sighed. Give me the seal. I just want this to be over with. I need to move on. He handed me another card, just like he did when I met him at his office. It wasn't as elaborately designed as his, but it had all of the info that I needed. Give Mike a call tomorrow. I'll tell him to be expecting you. With that, he started to put his jacket on and retie his tie that was hanging limply around his neck. Do you miss her, Terry? Your ex. Do you wish things could have worked out differently? I asked him curiously. A sad look crossed his face as he paused getting dressed. Every day, he said forlornly. What happened to Christine? Did she ever regret leaving you? The glazed-over pain once again crossed his eyes. No, Frank. Honestly, I couldn't expect her to. I wasn't the best husband. I was working all of the time, and when I was home, I wasn't really. You know? I guess I can understand that, I said as I reflected on my own marriage. He saw me going down that path and cut me off. Frank, you are nothing like me. Trust me. I cheated on my wife with my secretary. Scratch that. I got caught cheating on her with my secretary. I'd done it dozens of times and scathed. I treated her like property instead of like a wife. And she sat there, taking it. I thought she was the perfect wife. Thought I had the perfect life. I could do anything I wanted and come home to her like nothing happened. He gave a self-deprecating huff that could have been a laugh. Why don't you try to get her back? It seems like you still love her. The pain in his eyes grew, if that were possible. I did for a while. Nothing worked. She'd been lied to so many times that anything I said was automatically a lie. Hell, even I started to believe my lies. There was a time when I actually thought she was cheating on me. I hired a private eye and everything. I was ready to scorch the earth around her and piss on her corpse. So what happened? Well, it turns out that she had the same suspicions about me. Only hers turned out to be correct. It's funny, I never even gave a second thought to my cheating. But when I thought it was her doing it, I was livid. Long story short, she left me. Then, she met some other guy. A school teacher. They got married last year. You know what the worst part is? I know that she's better off with him. I'm a lawyer who makes a lot of money, and she's better off with a school teacher who drives a Ford Focus. How do you respond to that? After a moment of reliving his regrets, he mentally shook it off and walked over to the mirror to continue making himself presentable. You know, he said as he looked at me through the reflection in the mirror. He had a sly grin on his face. Starlet doesn't just do lap dances. She has other services that she offers. Wait a minute. What other services does Starlet offer? He chuckled as he turned around to face me. Let's just say that she is a sensual woman and that she really knows how to relieve stress. I knew what he was getting at. I'm not an idiot. You say services like she has sex for money. He looked at me with a sly grin, like I was finally getting the picture. You mean she's a woman who likes to help men out? He finished for me. I was trying to wrap my mind around it. I mean, it wasn't out of the realm of reality. But still, have you ever gotten your stress relieved from her? For money? Of course not, Frank. Exchanging money for sexual services is illegal. But Starlet and I are two consenting adults who had sex a couple of times. Great sex, I may add. Did you pay her? For sex? No. I told you, that's illegal. I'm a lawyer. But I may have loaned her money on occasion. She just hasn't paid me back yet. I have to admit that I looked at Starlet a little differently with this new information. I mean, I know that she's a stripper and all, but I didn't peg her for a prostitute. I thought I felt something, a connection with her. Chemistry. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't ready to give her my class ring or start walking her to school, but it seemed like there were sparks. Our playful banter, the hand-holding, the way she looked at me. It felt like it meant something. Maybe I was projecting. She was flirting with me, but isn't that her job? I guess I wouldn't really be the best judge of that at a time like this anyway. On the other hand, the thought of Starlet and I having sex was intriguing. Very intriguing. Her body looked flawless. I may be an emotional wreck, but I'm still a guy. A very horny guy who hasn't had sex in a while. But I wasn't ready for anything like that, especially paying for it. That seemed so wrong to me. I'm sure Starlet was worth every penny, but with everything going on, I couldn't bring myself to do it. So, you want me to send Starlet up? Terry asked one final time. I shook my head. Nah, I gotta head out myself. I have a lot to do. But thanks for calming me down, Terry. I needed this. I really appreciate everything that you've done for me. Anytime, Frank. And good luck. The next morning, Doug opened the door to his office and almost shit on himself when he saw me sitting in his chair behind his desk. What the F? Morning, Doug. I said with exaggerated congeniality. Frank, how the hell did you get in here? You have 10 seconds to get out before I call security, he said as he pulled out his cell phone. Put the damn phone down, Doug. I just wanted to talk. You owe me that much, I said as I held up my hands in a move to show peaceful intentions. He looked at me thoughtfully. I don't want any problems, Frank. If you want to talk, we can do that. But this is my job. You can't come in here and cause any trouble for me. I wanted to run across the room and spear him like a linebacker, but I knew that would only get me a one-way ticket to jail. I was on his territory. He had home court advantage. Plus, I wouldn't get answers. There are things I needed to hear from him. Unfortunately, he had to be conscious to give me those answers. You have a lot of nerve telling me that I can't make trouble for you. A hell lot of nerve. At least he had the decency to look somewhat dejected. Frank, I'm sorry for what happened. I really am. It's been eating at me. It took everything in me to remain seated. It was eating at him? Suddenly, his feelings mean something in this situation? You're sorry, Doug? What are you sorry for? For stabbing me in my back? For taking the only thing I would never share with you? For ruining my marriage? For breaking up my family? Or for throwing away 13 years of friendship? You're gonna have to break it down for me, Doug, because sorry can cover a whole lot of bases. Look, Frank, I understand why you're upset, but I'm sorry. Did you just say that you understand why I'm upset? You sound like customer service when they get an order wrong. Screw you. Do you even have the slightest clue? Do you really understand why I feel betrayed by the one person I called a friend? I get it, Frank. No, you don't. Don't you dare say you get it. You will never get what I feel right now. I trusted you. My fist slammed into his desk in a moment of uncontrolled anger. The sound echoed through the office, bouncing off of the walls and looming around us. Or at least it seemed that way to me. I was so emotional that I was practically vibrating. What you did hurt me in more ways than just stealing my wife. You also stole 13 years of friendship, 10 years of marriage, and you don't give a shit about that. He took a pause for a moment to gather himself. It must be hard trying to argue a point when you were the one in wrong. I know that what happened is hard for you. I did betray you. I regret that more than anything. But he stopped what he was about to say. But what? You were never there for her. She needed you, and you weren't there. I jumped out of my seat and marched across the room until we were face to face. To his credit, he didn't flinch or back down. In fact, he stared me down with the same intensity that I was glaring at him with. You want to know why, Frank? Why I did what I did? Fine, I'll tell you. Because you didn't deserve her. You had that wonderful woman at home who was just aching for attention. You couldn't care less. Night after night, she waited for you to notice her. But you were always at work. You never made time for her. For your kids. Face it, Frank. You don't want a family. It took every ounce of self-restraint to not put my fist through his face. I was so pissed I could visualize what I wanted to do to him. You scumsucker. Is that what you tell yourself so that you can sleep at night? Telling yourself that old Frank had it coming? In case you didn't realize, I had to work. You think because you were able to swoop in and tell Claire how pretty she was that you know the slightest thing about taking care of a family? About being a husband? How do you think we got that big house to live in? Huh? Do you think that Claire's Lexus RX was free? Where do you think the money came from to pay for all of that shit? I was speaking with so much force that spit was coming from my mouth. But Doug still had no intention of backing down, let alone apologizing. He was standing his ground. He honestly felt that he had a legitimate claim here. Bullshit, Frank. Bullshit. You and I both know that you aren't an hourly worker. What the hell does that have to do with anything? You could have gone home anytime you felt like. You get paid the same, whether you work 50 hours or 80. You were there because you wanted to be there. Even in the heat of this argument, I couldn't deny the truth behind his words. It made me pause. He took that pause as an indication that he made a valid point, and he stuck his heels even more in the sand. You could have made time for her if you wanted to, Frank. You didn't. You didn't try to make your marriage work. He was so full of righteous indignation. I think that was my biggest issue with this situation. Both he and Claire had no remorse about this because they felt they were right. I took a step back and tried a different approach. Doug, tell me, when is Claire's period? My voice was so calm in comparison to how it was a few seconds ago that it threw him a little. He looked confused. Why would I know that? I continued. What is Kelly allergic to? Stacy has nightmares after she watches a certain movie, yet she still watches it every time it comes on TV. What is it? He still stood there with a perplexed look on his face. I was on a roll. I'll ask you some easy ones, Doug. What is Kelly's favorite food? Or Stacy's? I don't see what this has to do with anything. I laughed sardonically. Of course you don't, Doug. You're busy screwing my wife, telling her how wonderful she is and how much of an idiot I am. But here's something you don't know. Claire, Kelly, Stacy, they're a total package. You can't have Claire without having them also. The fact that you've been screwing my wife for 6 months and haven't even tried to get to know my girls better tells me something about you. He looked like he swallowed a roach, but I wasn't done with him yet. You think you know her because the two of you share some laughs after you roll around in the bed for a bit, but you know shit about marriage. I was with her when she gave birth to my daughters. She almost died giving birth to Kelly, by the way. I was at her aunt's funeral with her. Do you know who her aunt was? She was the one Claire ran to whenever her mother was too drunk to cook food for her and her younger sister. But you didn't know that. All you know is what kind of food my wife likes, or what position she likes to be screwed in. It's easy to love someone in between the sheets. It's what comes after that makes a marriage work. He finally found his voice, and it was not as confident and assured as it was when he was reaming me. Frank, Save it, Doug. There isn't shit you can say to me. If you can do what you did to me after 13 years of friendship, how do you think you could do right by Claire and my girls? How could you even think you have what it takes to maintain a marriage and a family? If you cared about my family like you think you do, the thought of hurting my girls would kill you inside. You would do what I'm doing. You would swallow the bile and put what you feel like doing on the back burner. You would do this because the thought of bringing them pain would far outweigh your desire to get what you wanted. But we both know that the only thing you wanted from my family was Claire's glory holes. I started to walk out of his office. When I got to the doorway, I heard him say, I love her, Frank. Whether you believe me or not, I love her. I stopped and shook my head. Without turning around, I said, I don't ever want to see you again, Doug. This is your only warning. One day, there will come a time when security and the police won't be able to help you. You will answer for this. It may not be today or tomorrow, but it will happen. With that, I left him in peace. For now, as the weeks dragged into months, the divorce started gaining momentum. Claire had found a lawyer, a seal, much to my relief, and things kind of took on a life of its own. I was still staying in the house, as was she. We saw no need to get separate residences, at least for the moment. I had no problem using my office as a more permanent sleeping space. We'd come to a sort of truce about the entire thing. The pain and anger was still there for me, but it was like a dull ache. There were times when it flared up, a giggle overheard when she was on her cell phone, or a strange gift that I knew I hadn't given her were triggers. We would get into a few rows, but after a while those instances died down. I was becoming resigned to the fate of my family and was making peace with it. We interacted with each other when he had to. Dinner time, dealing with the girls, etc. We didn't want to make things awkward for the girls, so we tried to keep up appearances for their sake. We never crossed the proverbial line in the sand that we drew, i.e. any form of intimacy, but we were friendly, at least on the outside. All in all, it was the best shitty situation one could hope for. I know the cliche of the divorced man is to throw himself into work, but for me that would be redundant. The only difference as far as the amount of time I spent at work was the freedom of not feeling guilty. I hadn't seen or heard from Doug since our encounter. I really didn't expect to. After 13 years of friendship, a part of me missed him. Not really him, but the camaraderie that we had. Or I thought we had. I don't make friends easily. As sad as it is, he and Claire were the only two people that I'd considered friends. I didn't do activities that required more than one person, so meeting new people was problematic for me. My main hobby was figuring out a difficult problem that had to do with work. Now, since I was no longer getting sex, I added the hobby of watching spicy videos. So while Claire got to enjoy the freedom of searching for the love life she craved, I was left alone. As far as Claire, I tried to stay out of her business. I didn't ask if she were still seeing Doug, but I had my suspicions. She often went out, giving lightly veiled excuses for her absence. It would start with her coming to me, casually asking questions that were supposed to be innocuous. These questions were about any plans that I'd made as far as going out for the night. Then she would tell me about plans that she had made and forgot about. Sometimes she was meeting some friends. Other times she was having a me night. She knew that I knew. I could see it in her eyes as she gave me her paper-thin explanations. She wasn't really trying to hide it or be deceitful. In her mind, she was free. The marriage was only held together by the long wait for that piece of paper that made the divorce official. I think she was trying to leave me with as much dignity as she could by not throwing it in my face. She didn't leave the house all dressed and made up, like she was going on a date. She tried not to make it too obvious, yet she didn't insult my intelligence by going out of her way to get me to buy it. In a way, I was thankful for at least that consideration, but it also didn't do much to quell that anger. I was also a little jealous. There was the whole my best friend part, but there was another piece that invoked my envy. Here she was with the bright new prospect of love ahead of her, and I was stuck being alone. On the one hand, I didn't really mind being alone, but on the other hand, I was irked that she had the opportunity to move on and I didn't. But there was nothing I could do about it. She was no longer my wife. She had no responsibility to keep her vows. Hell, she'd already blown them sky high. There was no need for her to be any more faithful in divorce than she was when we were married. Still, it burned. It seemed like I was the only one going through the pain of ending a marriage. Claire got a pass from the heartbreak and was having a merry old time pursuing new love. Me? I had my job. Things would have probably continued for me in that vein until the divorce decree arrived. But life sometimes has a way of shaking you. One evening Claire was out with friends, and I was planted in my office, like I normally was, working out algorithms. Stacy, my 8-year-old, came in my office. "Daddy?" Mrs. Benson said that she needed the money tomorrow. "Mommy forgot to give it to me. Do you have it?" she asked as she walked over to me. "Money for what, sweetheart?" I asked as I hoisted her up and sat her on my lap. "For my cheerleading uniform and my pom-poms," she said, surprised, as if it were something I should have already known. I thought back and vaguely remembered Claire telling me that Stacy wanted to do cheerleading. I didn't think anything of it, because I didn't realize that they had cheerleading for 8-year-olds. Apparently they did. I was unaware that things had moved from her wanting to do cheerleading to her actually needing money for a uniform. Oh yeah, the money for cheerleading. I remember now. I lied through my teeth. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks, Daddy," she said as she shimmied off of my lap. Before she exited, I asked, "Sweetie, how much was it again?" I was expecting her to say something in the 40s or 50s. How much could a cheerleading uniform cost for an 8-year-old? I almost choked when she said, $198.99. She pronounced every syllable proudly, but even her cute voice didn't make that number sound any better. However, once she was gone out of the room, I was fighting with a whole other demon. I didn't even know she was in cheerleading. What kind of father has no idea what activities his daughter is up to? That thought plagued me. What further vexed me was the knowledge that had I missed her events, it wouldn't have been a big deal. More of the same-o, same-o. Claire would have made excuses for me, I'm sure. My daughter would have been given some "daddy is busy, but he sends his love" explanation. But she shouldn't have to. Claire shouldn't be put in the position to make my daughter understand why daddy can't be there. Military kids have to understand that. Their fathers and mothers are fighting for our country. Their absence actually means something. Here I was, in the same city and state as my daughters, and they have to understand why their father has no time for them. But I'm working hard for them, to give them the life that I never had. Wrong. You are working hard for you. You enjoy working hard, more than you enjoy your family. You are at work because that is where you really want to be. Was that true? Of course it was. I knew it. I've always known it. I hid behind the excuse that I was doing it for my family, but I couldn't support that lie anymore. I didn't get paid any more money working 80 hours a week than I got working 50. I didn't have to come home and keep working. I did it because I loved the job more than I loved my family. That's not true. I love my family. If I had to make a choice between saving my family and my job, which would I choose? Hell, I'd already made that choice. All of the times Claire begged me to spend time with her. All of the vacations that I canceled because there was a problem that I felt no one could solve but me. All of the birthdays that I missed. I always chose work over my family. Now, my family was being taken away from me, and it doesn't even make me miss a beat. I guess this situation was sort of karmic justice for me. No matter how much of an creep Doug was, he was right about one point. During our marriage, I almost always chose work over Claire. Now, the seeds of imbalance that I planted once upon a time had sprouted into a full-blown tree. My family was slipping away from me, and I had no choice but to spend time at work. Staring at your reflection with no blinders is daunting. That's what I did metaphorically. What I saw was a monster. Maybe not the kind of monster who harms his kids, but a monster nonetheless. I was a monster who thought he was a hero. The damage that I did to my kids was justified because I made good money. I was able to wave it off and still say that I love them. In my mind, I didn't have to be there to show them love. I can just buy it to ease my guilt for wanting to be someplace else. I closed the lid to my laptop, shutting off my work. I would deal with that stuff tomorrow. I had more important things to do right now. Girls, I yelled out as I walked out of my office. Who wants to go out for pizza and ice cream? The shrieks of joy made me smile. It was music to my ears. 911, call me immediately. The girls are gone. I thought you were staying home with them. Please get home so we can find them. That was the desperate text that I got as the girls and I sat in the restaurant. Between us was a half-eaten pizza and 3 empty bowls of ice cream. My daughters had barely nibbled on their slice of pizza before they were begging for dessert. It's funny how they were too full to finish their dinner, yet found the room to completely decimate their frozen treat. Girls are safe. They are with me. I shot back to Claire. Thank God, was the reply I got. I almost put my phone away when another text came through. You took the girls out? I didn't respond to that. You see, my girls were in the middle of serenading me with Let It Go from the movie Frozen. They belted the lyrics out in a unified voice as loud as they could. I may be biased, but I think that they sounded better than the cartoon version singing it. I looked around me expecting to find annoyed customers, but what I saw was a restaurant full of smiling people who were looking at my daughters and cheering them on. Kelly and Stacy sang their hearts out, completely oblivious to the audience that they had. I used my phone and started recording. I noticed that several of the people, most likely parents of kids my daughter's ages, were mouthing the words to the song along with them. When the girls finished with the sassy, "The cold never bothered me anyway," the entire restaurant exploded in applause and cheers. What the girls did next floored me. Normally when a person realizes that they have an unexpected audience, they get embarrassed. Stacy, obviously not shy like her father, actually got out of her seat and took a bow. Kelly soon joined at her side, and the two performers took a unified bow to their adoring fans. I don't think I ever witnessed anything that was simultaneously as beautiful and as funny as the sight of my daughters bowing and blowing kisses, like they just finished a Broadway play. This is what I was missing out on. All of these years, I couldn't stop smiling. My girls, my beautiful girls, were growing up so fast, and they were amazing. While I was constantly trying to make a better engine, or improve the latest stats, I was missing precious moments like this. What if I hadn't done this tonight? What if I just stayed home, like I'd done countless other nights, and banged away at my keyboard? I would still be blind. What if more years had passed before I woke up? How long were Kelly and Stacy going to stay this young and innocent? I realized that I didn't want to look back years from now and not have memories of moments like this. When my girls come home with boyfriends and fiancés, I want to embarrass them by telling stories of tonight and other nights like it. When things died down, I paid the check and we left. When we got in the car, Stacy said, "Thank you for the ice cream, Daddy. I like it when you take us out." "You're welcome, Sweet Pea. Thanks for the song." She giggled. "You're welcome. You're the best daddy ever." Within moments, my girls were fast asleep. I drove the rest of the way home in silence. The best daddy ever. Kids very rarely see the flaws in their parents when they are young. No matter how much we neglect them and put them on the back burner, they still think we walk on water. Even when we don't. When I pulled into the driveway, I shot Claire a text. "In driveway. Girls sleep. Need help." Moments later, Claire came out and grabbed Kelly. She instantly wrapped her arms and legs around Claire. Stacy did the same to me when I lifted her. We carried our daughters to their rooms. Once we got them laid down, we met in the hallway. "So, you stopped working long enough to take them out. I'll bet they loved that. What did you guys do?" she asked, not able to hide the surprise in her voice. "We went out for pizza and ice cream. Then they serenaded me with a song." I couldn't help but laugh at the memory. You should have seen them, Claire. They were amazing. The entire restaurant sang along with them. Then, when everyone cheered, They got up and bowed. They bowed. I have never seen anything like it. We shared a laugh as I showed her the video. We had to squeeze in close so that both of us could see it. Being that close to her felt odd after everything that happened as of late. She must have felt it too, because she shot me a quick glance as she took a step back. I'm glad you got to spend time with Kelly and Stacy. It was really nice of you. You should do that more often. They're gonna need it when... Her voice trailed off without finishing the sentence. But she didn't really have to. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna make some changes. Tonight was an eye-opener for me. I don't want to miss out on their childhood. I've already lost you. I don't want to lose them. She looked strangely at me, as if trying to see if I was being facetious or not. I was speaking honestly and from the heart, and I guess that she saw that. Her face had a flash of regret cross it, but it went away quickly. Well, no matter what you do, they will love you. That's how children are. Too bad adults aren't like that, I said without thinking. It was meant to be under my breath, but I said it loud enough for her to hear. Once again, the regret crossed over her face, and this time it didn't go away. Frank, don't start. I felt the urge to apologize, but then I didn't. What was I apologizing for? Speaking the truth? My intent wasn't to hurt her, but it didn't make what I said any less true. Just help me understand, Claire. Was I really that bad? Bad enough for you to stop loving me? You really feel nothing about this? You don't feel bad at all? Are you really asking me if I feel bad? Of course I do. I feel like shit every time I think about it. All of the plans that we had. All of the memories. I feel like a failure. On top of that, we aren't going to be able to hide this from the girls forever. One day, and very soon, we are going to have to tell them what is going on. And it will crush them. I feel bad that we are going to break their hearts. And it was my decision that put it in motion. So why? Why did you do it? Tears were forming in her eyes as she looked up at the ceiling with her hands on her hips. Because I got lonely, Frank. Plain and simple. I live in this big house. I have all of the latest clothes. I drive a fancy car, and I'm miserable. All I wanted was a little time from you. That's all. Just small tokens of appreciation to let me know that I mattered. But apparently, I was worthless. I was so undesirable that my husband made time for everything else but me. And Doug does all of that for you? She nodded in acknowledgement. Yes, he does make me feel desirable. He texts me to see how I'm doing. He sends me flowers. He likes being around me. Is that what you wanted to hear? That was the last thing I wanted to hear. But I did want to. I had to know. I had to understand what he gave her that I didn't. Now I did. Well, as soon as I'm out of the way, the two of you can be together. You can ride off into the sunset, hand in hand. Don't do this, Frank. What's done is done. Going down this road is only going to lead to more pain. I had to laugh at that, even though it was the farthest thing from funny a statement could get. Are you serious? You are seriously trying to tell me not to go down this road because it will lead to more pain. You do realize that this road that I'm going down is one that you set us on, right? Her nose flared and her eyes narrowed. She poked me in the chest and said, in case you forgot, you neglected me first. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I couldn't swallow the bile anymore. You know what, Claire? I'm so sick of you singing that same sad tune. In case you forgot, you cheated on me with my best friend. Do you think anything I did justifies that? Do you really think that I deserve that kind of pain? She didn't have a response to that, which actually boded well for her. Only a complete sociopath would have answered that question with another defense. I wasn't done yet. I had a real eye-opener tonight, Claire. Tonight I came face to face with my choices. I see how I played a part in where we are. But you sit back, crying about the big bad husband who worked too much, and you completely ignore what you brought to this. Tell me, did you once suggest that we go to counseling? Did you do anything to try to fix this? I came to you, Frank, and you ignored me. So, what was your next step? Huh, Claire? Because here's my thinking. My logic, if you will. When you have a project that isn't going the way you want it to go, you think of a next step. If the project is worth saving, and you believe in it, then you seek alternative options to saving it. Bringing in a fresh set of eyes to see if there is anything you missed is the preferable choice. Or, you can scrap it all together and start working on a new project. One that is more worthwhile. Because the old project just isn't worth the headache. So, my question to you is, what was your next step? You would use an engineering analogy. That's all you're capable of thinking about, she said with a sneer. However, her eyes were transparent. I knew I hit pay dirt. Even she couldn't deny the logic to what I said. Her ploy at misdirection was feeble. It's an analogy that fits, and you know it. If this marriage was so important to you, why didn't you change tactics? Why didn't you get a fresh set of eyes? Why didn't you suggest we go to counseling? She immediately got defensive. You didn't suggest counseling either. I wasn't the one who was dissatisfied. I thought we were okay. Maybe I was naive or not paying attention, but I didn't see our marriage on a path to destruction. If I did, I would have tried to fix it. Because to me, our marriage was a project worth saving. But for you, this marriage was not worth anything. You just took the easy way out and opened your legs to a new. I took a moment to look at her before finishing. I couldn't stop my face from forming the disgusted expression that came over it. Nor did I want to. You saw our marriage heading over a cliff, and you watched it from afar. You let it dangle there. Then, you walked over and pushed it off. Now you want to sit here and pretend that you did everything you could to save it. Like you had no other choice. But that shit ain't flying, Claire. You slept with my best friend. You not only had an affair, but you did it with the one person that would hurt me the most. You could have found anybody else to screw, but you chose Doug. No part of you felt that this boundary was off limits. The two of you decided that my feelings no longer mattered, and you want to sit back and try to make what you did okay? By now the tears were free flowing down her face, but she still didn't have a response. We both just stood there in frustrated silence, alone, in the same room, but separated by an impassable chasm created by years of neglect, apathy, and bad choices. What do you want me to say, Frank? You're right? I'm sorry? Would that make you feel better? Huh. Another misdirection ploy. Make it about my ego, my need to punish her. But I wasn't letting her off that easily. You quit trying, Claire. You gave up on our marriage. You need to own that. That was your choice. You left me nothing to fight for. She finally whispered between sobs. I couldn't do this anymore. I was mentally and physically drained. I'm tired, Claire. I'm going to bed. With that, I went into my office and closed the door behind me. A couple of weeks after that conversation took place, the papers arrived. Signed, sealed, delivered. It was official. My marriage was over. The divorce was pretty amicable. I don't mean to understate the pain that went into actually sitting with the lawyers and dividing assets, but dwelling on it won't make the story any more interesting. I was told by both lawyers that it was a fair divorce, though I would wholeheartedly disagree. Sure, all of our material things were split pretty fairly, except the house, which she got because she had primary custody of the kids, but it seemed like I got the lion's share of the emotional baggage. On top of that, she received monthly child support and spousal support from me. I agreed with the child support, but to pay spousal support to the woman who voluntarily split the family up seemed like a kick in the nuts. But there was no way around it. That's the beauty of no-fault divorce. My only consolation was that it would have been way more if Mike wasn't there. The first proposal was 2/3 of my paycheck. Was I able to live on what was left over? Sure. I did make a lot of money. I had a fair share of investments and other assets. I was successful in hiding some of those assets from her lawyer, so I wasn't the stereotypical divorced husband who has to live like a pauper. Still, I would have liked for her to experience a little more discomfort for her choices. I also thought about my girls. I had to question the wisdom behind the choice to shield them from the impending doom by pretending that nothing was different. Why we made that choice is beyond me. Now, we could no longer hide it from them. Instead of preparing them ahead of time and getting them used to the idea, we were left with the task of suddenly pulling the rug out from under them. As much as I would like to claim benevolent love as the reason for keeping the real situation of my marriage a secret from the kids, I can't. At this point in my life, I was done hiding my failures behind the thin veil of selfless acts gone wrong, pretending that my bad decisions were done out of a misguided attempt to protect the ones I cared about. I did it because I was a coward. Point blank. Claire had her reason, probably the same one as I, but I wasn't going to determine my course of actions by what she admits to herself. She seems to have a high aptitude for self-rationalization, and I couldn't allow myself to be caught in it anymore. Tomorrow's man is made by the choices you make today. That was something my dad used to say to me. I was a teenager at the time with a mind full of the things I was denied in life, so I never really stopped to think about what that meant. Now, those words were my new lease on life. What kind of man did I want to be tomorrow? The man I am today is due to the choice I made yesterday to put work above my family. If I don't like that man, then I have to make choice to change him for tomorrow. I wanted to be a good dad. I also wanted to be successful. Who says I couldn't have both? I didn't have to create such an imbalance in my life that only left room for one or the other. Why couldn't I kill it at work and then come home to my daughters, leaving work behind? So I did what I do best. I drew up a plan, an algorithm for my life. Believe it or not, math can solve about 90% of the problems we face in life. Of course, an engineer would think that. But in this case, math was the key. If the problem that you are facing is balance, then isn't there an equation that could solve that? 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. That is 168 hours. I was accustomed to spending 80 of those hours at work. That only left 88 hours for everything else. My family had to share those 88 hours with all of the other shit that I had to deal with, including sleep. How had I not seen this before? So I used simple math to determine the man that I wanted to be. And it took all of 20 minutes. I would earn my daughter's love and affection. They gave it no matter what I did. I owed it to them to be worthy of it. I heard sniffling coming from the room that I used to share with my ex-wife. The door was opened a crack, so all I had to do was give it a slight nudge. I saw Claire laying on her stomach in the middle of the king-sized bed we once slept on together. Once upon a time. Above her head was her copy of the unfolded document that I'd read only a few hours ago. Her hands were covering her face. Her body shook as she sobbed. I wanted to talk to her about where we go from here, but now is not the time. Did I feel vindicated that she finally showed some sort of emotion over the loss of our marriage? For me, the blow wasn't as deep as it once was. I'd been dealing with the fact that it was over for a while now. Ever since she called out Doug's name in bed, I'd been wrestling with the task of burying my marriage. She'd been protected. Doug kept her occupied enough so that she didn't really have to dwell on it. The marriage ending was tomorrow's problem in her eyes. Today, she got to enjoy what she'd been missing while she wasted her years on me. However, all dreams come to an end. Reality always catches up with you. Before her was a tangible item for the choices that she made. It was in black and white, and it had her signature. She couldn't deny it anymore. I lightly closed the door and let her have her moment. She was going to need it. From here things got a little harder. We still had to tell the girls. I wasn't looking forward to that, so I could imagine what she must be going through. I needed something. Something to distract me, even for the moment. Something beautiful. And I knew exactly what it was. Or rather, who it was. Ever since that day at the club with Terry, I'd not been able to stop thinking about her. Starlet. I don't know why. If I believed Terry, she was a prostitute. Someone who screwed countless men for money. Not an honorable woman. Yet, I felt something with her. A connection. The way she looked at me, talked to me, flirted with me. I can't explain it, but I wanted to feel that again. So I got in my car and drove. About 20 minutes later, I was pulling into the parking lot of Mario's Gentleman's Lounge. When I got inside, I was met by cigarette smoke, the smell of beer, and the vision of dozens of near-naked women. But I was only looking for one. Welcome to Mario's. How can I help you, sweetie? A beautiful girl said as she greeted me. Even with the makeup, she looked barely old enough to drink. As pretty as she wasn't what I wanted. Yes, I was actually looking for someone. Is Starlet here? The girl's smile never left her face, but it faded from her eyes. Yeah, she's here. Who do I tell her is waiting for her? I was embarrassed. There was no way she would remember me. She had to give dozens of lap dances a day, but I gave my name anyway. My name is Frank. She's not expecting me or anything. I was just wondering if she was available. Okay, hon. Take a seat at that table right there. I'll see if she's not busy. The young woman left to search for Starlet, and I took a seat at the indicated table. A scantily clad waitress approached me to take my drink order and then left to go fill it. Both Starlet and my drink arrived at the same time. Hey Frank, I'm Starlet. Jessie said that you were asking for me, she said as she approached. Even though I expected it, I was kind of disappointed when I didn't see any recognition in her eyes. It had been about 4 months since I came here. She'd probably seen hundreds of faces between then and now. Still, there is a desire in all of us to be special, to stand out above the rest. There are thousands of romantic books and movies that feature that one moment when two people make an unexplainable connection amidst all of the distractions that surround them. In each of us there is that fantasy. The famous singer pointing to the beautiful fan and pulling her on stage. The high school nerd who finally gets the attention of the popular cheerleader. Or the rich prince who hides his royalty status and falls for the nobody girl. All of these are common themes in our imaginary scenarios. As unrealistic as they are, we always want to believe the promise that we stand out from the rest. Hey Starlet, I know you don't remember me. I came in here a few months ago with a friend of mine. I was feeling really down that day, and you gave me a few dances. It made me feel better. She smiled broadly at that and sat down in the seat opposite of me. I'm glad to hear that. Would you like another dance now? I just happened to be free. Those eyes looked through me, like they'd done that night. Transfixed me. I would have committed murder for her in that moment. Luckily, The only thing she wanted from me was a lap to grind on. I'd like that. With that, she stood up and held out her hand, indicating that she wanted me to take it. When I did, she interlaced our fingers and she led me through the club. "Do you want to stay out here in the open area, or should we go somewhere more private?" she asked. Once again, those eyes looked at me, like they were seeing through me. I turned away. It was like looking into the sun. "Private?" My voice croaked. She nodded and led me to a corner. I was hoping to go to the champagne room," I said, once again finding it hard to speak. She stopped walking. "The champagne room isn't cheap. You sure that's what you want?" I gulped and nodded, wondering if she were talking about the actual room or what I imagined went on in there. It didn't matter. I was willing to pay for both. "Okay, sweetie, come with me," she said as she led me to the stairs. Before she went up, she stopped and turned suddenly, giving me a coy look. "I remember you now. You're Terry's friend. Came in here because you were having problems with your wife. Cherry boy." I laughed at that. "Yeah, that's me. Cherry boy. Well, I'm glad you came back to see me, Frank. You never forget your first, do you? Now, let's go upstairs. I don't have to tell you where I want your eyes, do I? Trust me, I will not offend you." "You better not." She giggled. Once we were up the stairs, she led me to a private corner. I found myself getting nervous. I didn't know what to expect. Was I going to get laid? Was she expecting to just do a lap dance? How do I even ask? "So Frank, what is it that you want?" she asked, as if she saw my dilemma and gave me the opening that I needed. I gulped. "I don't know," I said honestly. She sat me down and straddled me, just as she did the last time. Then she bent low until her mouth was right next to my ear. "Did you want a lap dance or something else?" she whispered, her breath dancing on my neck as she spoke. Her arms wrapped around me and her hands rubbed my head softly. The scent of flowers and sex once again filled my nostrils. "I want you." I was lost. She owned my eyes and ears at that moment. Nothing else mattered. "What do you want to do to me, baby?" she asked, sending me over the edge of sanity. I want to have you," I said finally. She stopped and sat up, looking me in my eyes and smiling. "Okay, I wanted you to say it to make sure you weren't a cop. If you want to have me, then you are going to have to do a couple of things first." "What kind of things?" "First, you're going to have to get a room, and not a cheap one. When I get off of work at 2, you can pick me up outside the club and take me your place." "What's the other thing?" "Pay me $300. That is precisely what happened. I got a room down by the beach. It had a balcony that looked out into the ocean. It was the peak time, close to summer, so it was $350 a night. I didn't know what she meant by not a cheap room, so I went for one that I knew would qualify. It wasn't expensive enough to be appearing to show off my money, but it definitely wasn't some hole in the wall. She strolled out of the club at about 2:30. She looked around and spotted me by my car. As she walked over to me, I was struck by how different she looked. She was still a sexy bombshell. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, sexy as hell, but she was more real. The starlet in the club was the perfect sex bot. Everything about her screamed, "Take me." But this woman walking over to my car was just a girl. Her face was devoid of all of the over-the-top stripper makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail that bounced when she walked. She even had on a pair of glasses. "Hey Frank, I almost didn't expect you to show up," she said when she made it over to me. Her smile was spread across her face, but something was missing in it. I guided her over to the passenger side of my car and opened the door for her. She very smoothly stepped inside of the car and sat down. When I made it over to the driver's side and got in, she lightly touched my hand. Do you have something for me?" she asked. I knew what she was referring to. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope that had the money in it. Once I handed it to her, it disappeared into her purse. It's always best to get that out of the way early. It could ruin the mood later. But don't you worry. You won't be thinking about it soon enough. She purred as she rubbed my arm, causing the hairs on it to stand up. "You have a nice car. What do you do?" she asked as we pulled out of the parking lot of the club. "I'm an engineer. I design machines. In fact, I designed the engine for this very car." She looked impressed. "Wow, no shit." "No shit. It goes from 0 to 60 in less time than it takes to crack an egg. I'm actually on the team who is trying to make a new kind of engine," I said proudly. She nodded and smiled. "You're obviously very good at your job. That's a huge turn on." I know she meant it as a compliment, but my eyes glossed over when she said that. I was good at my job. The best, in fact. But the price I paid to be that wasn't worth it. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked. I shook it off. "Nah, just haunted by ghosts. You know? I know the feeling, she said softly. I got the feeling that she was talking more to herself than she was to me. We sat in silence for a few moments. You hungry? I asked, trying to break the tension that settled. She nodded. A little, but I'm sure you want to get to the room and get what you paid for. I can wait. That sat wrong with me. I didn't like the idea of having sex with her and having her hungry while doing it. Do you like pancakes? Huh. Do you like pancakes? The only places open at this time are IHOP and McDonald's, and I can't eat fake food. She gave me a little smile to show that my gesture was appreciated. I'm good, Frank. Thanks for asking. But I'd rather just do what we came to do. That sounded so cold. Clinical. Do what we came to do? Like this was nothing more than a business transaction. I mean, I guess it was. But she could have left me with the fantasy that this was more. Okay, I said, a bit too dejectedly. She caught it, but she didn't say anything else about it. The rest of the ride was pretty quiet. It wasn't until we got to the room that the first words were uttered.
Eso Frankie.
What kind of things would you like to do to me? She purred. Her eyes looked me over seductively, as if they were taking an object of desire. The change was so sudden, yet so seamless. She morphed so effortlessly that it appeared to be natural. But it wasn't. That's when I got a real look at her. This person, this purring kitten that was all sex and lust, was an act. A beautiful mirage. The flirtatious person that she was when I first met her, and when I came back to see her tonight wasn't the real starlet. Hell, that wasn't even her real name. I don't know what came over me, but I wasn't turned on anymore. Her sex appeal was caught up in the fantasy. A fantasy that I now knew was bullshit. I didn't want to have sex with her anymore. She closed the gap between us and began to rub my arms and back. She lightly kissed my neck as she pressed her body against mine. I could feel the softness of her breasts fitting to my chest. Starlet, I tried to say. She continued to kiss me. Do you like that, baby? She cooed as her hands snaked its way between us. As much as my body wanted her, my mind wasn't on the same page. For me, both were needed. I know that many guys would snatch my man card and rip it up over this, but with the realization that I now faced about her, I couldn't do it. Starlet, I said with more assertiveness as I lightly pushed her off. She looked confused as I walked to the other side of the room, rubbed my head in frustration. Okay, Frank, what do you want? I thought I had you figured out, but apparently not. Tell me what you're looking for. I noticed the hint of exasperation in her voice, but she recovered quickly. Tell Mama what she can do for you, Frankie. She was good. She had this seductress personality down cold. She was able to switch it on and off at will, but I saw through that. I want to get something to eat. I'm hungry. What about you? You hungry? I said as I reached for the phone to call room service. Her face became annoyed, but once again, it was gone in a flash, and the kitten was back. She strolled over to me and tried to wrap herself around me again. I sidestepped her. She stood there confused. Then the irritation bubbled to the surface. Why the hell did you bring me here for Frank? Huh? Are you gonna have sex with me? Or are you here to play games? I had a long night of dancing, and I could be at home sleeping. But I came here with you. To have sex. Now, tell me what it is that you want so I can make you bust a nut and get home. There she was. The real starlet. Or whatever her name was. I want to talk. I said honestly. She looked at me skeptically for a moment. Then she shook her head and laughed. When she was done laughing, she looked at me with irritation again. Take me back to the club? She said curtly. What? I said, take me back to the goddamn club. That's where my car is parked. Tonight is over. I am not the girl you want, and I'm not gonna waste either of our time. Are you kidding? How would you know what I want? She laughed at me again. Please. You think you're different than the hundreds of other guys that I see? What? Did you think that because you opened the door for me and asked me if I was hungry that I would suddenly become overwhelmed with love? This isn't some fairy tale. It was supposed to be a plain old sex in a motel. That's not what I was trying to do. Frank, stop kidding yourself. What you want is a girlfriend experience. You want to dine me, talk and laugh with me, and then have sex with me like we're in a real relationship, like I'm your girlfriend. And then you go home, back to your wife, and you become the husband that she needs. At the mention of my wife, tears came down. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't stop. They kept coming. I tried to talk, but I couldn't. The torrent of tears kept coming. Starlet looked at me perplexed for a moment, and then her face went sad. Your wife, she left you, didn't she? At that I broke. I sobbed. I'm not talking about a manly sort of crying where you let a few tears fall. I'm talking about all-out bawling. I just got the papers today. I was able to say. And then I fell to my knees. I thought I was done crying over this. I thought I was past this, but I wasn't. And now, I was in a room with a smoking hot woman, and all I could do was cry over that bitch. Starlet blew out an exasperated breath as she put her hands on her hips. She honestly didn't know what to do. Slowly, she crossed the room and stood over me. Then she pressed my head into her stomach. I wrapped my arms around her waist and let the tears fall. We stayed like that for about 10 minutes. When the flood subsided, I looked up into her eyes. They were full of sympathy. "I'm sorry, I guess I ruined the mood," I said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Pretty much," she returned, but there was a hint of playfulness in her voice. Then her face got serious. "Look, Frank, I'm sorry about your marriage. I really am. But what you want from me tonight isn't something that I can give you. I can screw the shit out of you and leaving you limping home, but I can't pretend to be your girlfriend. I'm not built that way. I'm sorry." I nodded as I stood up. "I get it, Starlet." "I do." She nodded and kissed me on the cheek. Then she grabbed her purse, reached inside of it, and grabbed the envelope with money out. "Here's your money, Frank," she said as she tried to hand it to me. I pushed it back at her. "You keep it, Starlet." But we didn't have sex. I looked at her, and I realized that for the first time in a while, I felt a sort of release. It's not the manliest thing to admit, but maybe I just needed a good cry to get that bile out of me. Having a woman to hug me as I did so may have been exactly what I needed. "You helped me tonight, Starlet. Whether you realize it or not, you did. We didn't have sex, but I consider this money well spent. So you keep it. You earned it." She nodded and put it back in her purse. We left the room and headed to my car so that I could take her back to the club. We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, like two people desperately thinking of something to say. It was more comfortable. Neither of us had to speak. We didn't really have anything to say, but it was okay. "You know what, Frank? I am hungry. What do you say we go out to IHOP after all?" She broke the silence with. I glanced at her to find her looking back at me. "Sure. I could go for some unlimited pancakes," I joked. She smiled and nodded. "Me too." As we took our detour, I turned to her. "Hey, Starlet, if you don't want to answer this, I understand. But I have to ask, what's your real name?" She took a breath and thought for a minute. Then she looked at me with those piercing eyes. "Cassandra. You can call me Sandra." I smiled at her and nodded. "Nice to meet you, Sandra." Her look turned into a smirk. Yes, nice to meet me. 'Cause I just told you my real name, and it's like you're meeting me for the first time." "Clever," she said sarcastically. "I thought so." "That's because you're corny," she threw back at me. She laughed as she looked away and shook her head. However, when I got a look at the reflection of her face in the passenger side window, I saw her smiling. Sandra. It really was nice to meet her. I watched in amazement as Sandra devoured every morsel of food on her plate. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, all of it, gone. She must have felt me watching her because she looked up from her meal with an irritated look on her face. "What?" she asked with a mouthful of food. "Nothing. Nothing. You just eat like a homeless girl. I was about to give you $1 and have you wash my windshield." Her face twisted into a smirk. Or at least what would have been a smirk if her mouth wasn't so full. She swallowed her food and said, "Oh, so we're funny now. An hour ago you were bawling like little girl who had her first period." Something passed over my face, because hers fell. "Frank, I'm sorry. I was just making a joke. I didn't mean." I waved her apology off. "No, it's cool. You didn't say anything wrong. I'm just dealing with a lot right now." She nodded and took a sip of her orange juice. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. "Do you want to talk about it? I may be a paid escort and a stripper, but I'm also a good listener," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. I saw a flash of an insecure little girl in that moment, but it went away quickly. Something about her made me comfortable. I got her. I felt it that first night we met. Even though every part of our interaction was fake, I couldn't help feel a sense of kinship with her. It's a long, boring story. Trust me, you don't want to hear it. She looked at me and smiled warmly. "Well, you paid me $300, and you bought me breakfast. I'm pretty sure sex is off the table, so consider this you getting your money's worth." "Wait a minute, you're not paying for this?" I asked with fake shock as I pointed at the meal. Her eyes caught the humor in mine, and we both laughed. Then she looked at me expectantly, like she was waiting for me to tell her everything. So I did. I went through the entire story, from that first night that Claire revealed that she was unhappy, to the first night I met Sandra. She didn't interrupt one time. When I was finished, things fell quiet for a moment. If you don't mind me saying, your ex-wife is a real bitch. She broke the silence with, I felt like I had an obligation to defend Claire, but I didn't. To be honest, it felt good to have someone on my side. She continued, I can understand her frustrations with you, but to go and sleep with your supposed best friend? Lo. She says that I left her no choice. No reason to fight for the marriage. Well, in my opinion, no one ever gives you a reason to fight for something. You do it because losing it will be more painful than the fight you have to endure to keep it. I've seen mothers endure humiliation and pain to fight for kids that don't give them a reason to. Wives will even defend low-life husbands who beat them and degrade them because they feel that being without that person is worse than the shit they have to deal with to be with them. That's the difference between love and everything else. Love is its own reason to keep fighting. I couldn't help but to be amazed with her. She saw it and once again gave a self-deprecating laugh. What? A stripper can't be deep? I had to laugh at that. I guess you would know more about life than normal people. At that, her eyes narrowed as she glared at me angrily. Her sudden change in mood caught me off guard. More about life than normal people? What is that supposed to mean? So, I guess that I was obviously molested as a child, or abandoned by my father. Why else would I be some abnormal stripper? She lashed out. It seemed that I insulted her, which was not my intent at all. No, that's not what I meant. I was just thinking that you see all kinds of stories with the people you encounter. I can't be the first guy to come to you looking to recover from heartbreak. In the room, you knew exactly what I was after, which means that you came across another guy like me before. That's all I meant. Whatever. She looked down at the menu for a moment, halting the progression of this conversation. I didn't want to make a bigger mess of things than I already had, so I simply shut up. She must have seen something on the menu that she liked, because I saw her lips curled into a smile. Then she looked up at me and playfully asked, would you let me get a slice of apple pie if I blow you? How does she do that? Sandra seemed to have the ability to mask herself. She will show small glimpses of the real woman inside, but that would be gone in an instant. She built several personas to hide from the world, and she was able to switch effortlessly between them. The sex kitten, the hard-nosed bitch, or the smirking sarcastic girl who wasn't easily impressed. She used them as a suit of armor. She encased herself into them. Shield up, sword drawn, and always prepared for defense. Most people wouldn't care to get past those illusions. The sex kitten makes men only want to screw her brains out. The hard-nosed bitch causes them to want to stay clear of her. And the sarcastic woman just makes them not want to even try to get to know her. I decided to not be like other men. Like I said before, I got her. I could see past the exterior shell. Because of that, I would be able to tread those dangerous waters, despite her reluctance to let me in. I found her intriguing enough to try. Have you ever been in love? I asked. She stiffened up at the question, like it surprised her. She couldn't hide the gloomy expression on her face that mirrored her feelings when I asked it. After seeing how she reacted, a yes or no answer was irrelevant. Only a person who is loved, got burned, and lost could feel the emotion that would make such a beautiful face look so sad. So far, we'd only talked about me. I wanted to ask her about her past. She was right about one thing. I did wonder how a woman like her got on the path to being a stripper who also slept with men for money. She didn't seem like the type. If we check our stereotypes for stripper, hookers, then I'm sure we will all come up with some bubble-headed sex addict who craves sex, or some gold-digging femme fatale who would probably kill you to get your wallet if given the chance. Sandra played those parts to perfection, but they were just that, parts, like an actress does for a movie or play. I could see that it was all an act of self-preservation. Underneath that exterior was so much more. Her eyes glazed over as a memory haunted her. She shook it off, like she did everything else, and changed the subject. Well, Frank, I'm going to turn back into a pumpkin soon. I have to get home and get to sleep. 5 a.m. is way past my bedtime. Her redirection of my attention worked, but only because I didn't realize how late it was. Holy shit, it's 5? I asked, checking my watch. It was indeed. Where had the time gone? Yep, time flies when you're with me. I have that effect on people. It's because I'm awesome, she said as she shot me a smile. Frustrating is more like it. We spent all night talking about me, and I don't know the slightest thing about you. There it was again. A flash of the real Sandra. I saw it in her eyes, but just for that initial moment. She refused to let her guard down. That mask was back. Well, you could have known all about me if you wanted to, handsome, she said playfully as she waved her hands across her body, like she was putting it on display. You know that's not what I mean. Right then, her demeanor changed. Her eyes softened. Right before me, her face became more innocent. It's gonna cost you a lot more than $300 for that, she said. There was no humor in her voice, no sarcasm. That was the real Sandra speaking. What about $300 and breakfast? I joked lightly. That got a genuine laugh out of her. Not the throaty, seductive laugh that she does as starlet, or one filled with cynicism when I say something sappy. It was a real laugh. Frank, we need to go. I need sleep. Some of us have to work for a living, she said, clamming up once more. She slid out of the booth and grabbed her purse, indicating that there was no room for negotiation and that this conversation was over. I do work. A lot. That's the main reason my wife left me. Well, when you do your job in 6-inch heels and a thong, we'll compare notes. For some reason, the image of me in heels and a thong was hilarious. It must have been funny to her too, because we laughed together. Touché, was all I could say. The waitress must have sensed that we were ready to go, because she showed up with the check. After I thanked her, I placed a $5 tip on the table and went to pay the bill. The drive back to the club was a short one from where we were. After a few minutes, I was parked next to her Jetta Passat. Well, Frank, it's been a while since a man has lasted all night with me. You have some stamina, she joked, once again using her go-to move of injecting a sexual reference into every conversation. But I wasn't going for it. I wasn't going to let her sweep tonight under the rug with playful banter. Sandra, you helped me tonight. I don't let that many people get close to me, but I'm glad I let you in. Thank you for being here. For the first time tonight, her guard was completely dropped. She genuinely looked me in the eyes. Anytime, Frank. I hope everything works out for you. You're a good guy. You deserve better. With that, she kissed me softly on the lips and got out of my car. It wasn't a passionate kiss, the kind shared between two lovers. It was a soft peck, a kiss one might give a friend. I watched her get into her car, drive off. Then I drove back to my hotel room. I figured that I would get my room for an extra night. I might as well sleep in a big king-size bed for a change. When I went to sleep, I slept like the dead. I was exhausted, but for the first time in a while, I felt an ebb in the pain. It wasn't the mask of anger that I'd been wearing lately to convince myself that this didn't faze me. I actually felt it subside, like I released the pressure and got rid of the excess. I felt like I can finally start healing. Frank, you awake? Claire's voice sounded apprehensive as she knocked on my office door. It was about a week after my evening with Sandra. When I returned to my house after my nights in the hotel room, I felt that I had turned a corner. I had clarity. My future didn't look so bleak anymore. I also found it amusing that Claire questioned where I was and why I was coming in at that time of morning. Like I owed her anything. Of course, I let her know that my night was completely innocent and that she could rest assured that I didn't have sex with anyone. Yeah, right. I simply brushed her off and left her standing there. I didn't care what she thought. I began preparing to leave my home. I rented a storage unit and began moving some of my things into it. I also started looking for another place to stay. At this time, I was actually choosing between a condo that was close to my job and a townhouse that was a couple of blocks down from Claire and my girls. I felt like I was finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Then tonight happened. What is it, Claire? I asked in a deadpan voice. I really didn't want to see her. Still, she took my acknowledgement of her as an invitation and came into my office. I swiveled around in my chair to face her. She looked like she'd been bawling. Her face was stained, as if it was freshly dried of tears from her puffy eyes. I was just checking on you, seeing how you were, seeing how I was. Isn't that sweet? Well, in all truthfulness, I was pissed at her. You see, tonight was the night we decided to break the news to the girls about mommy and daddy. How do you explain to a 5 and an 8-year-old that the parents are splitting up? How do you reiterate that they will see daddy, even though he will be at another house? How do you tell them that they will still be a family and that nothing will change? Very painfully and with a lot of tears. And I had to put my daughters through that. Screw Claire and her unhappiness. So you can imagine the joy I felt at hearing her voice when she knocked on my door. I'm just peachy. Thanks for asking. Frank. What, Claire? What? What do you want from me? I lashed out as I threw a pen that I'd been holding in my hand onto the desk behind me. I threw it with a little too much force because it skidded across it and over the edge. You wanted freedom. I gave you that. You wanted half of everything, except what she didn't know about. I gave you that. Alimony, child support, my children. I gave you everything you wanted. What else can I give you? Please tell me what more I can do to help you. I just wanted to talk. I laughed sardonically. Talk? Oh, now you want to talk? Well, better late than never. Unfortunately, I'm all out of talks with you. You see, I had to break my daughter's hearts today. I had to tell them that mommy and daddy can't get their shit together, and mommy screwed her husband's best friend and now their entire family is destroyed. So no, I don't have any sympathy left to give you. If you want someone to make you feel better, then you have to find a guy who doesn't give a shit whether or not your decision to break this family up hurts Kelly and Stacy. I'm not that guy. You should go find your boyfriend. He couldn't care less. She looked at me incredulously. Do you have to be like this now? Of all times to be an a-hole, you couldn't take a break just this once to be a human being? I was there too. I was sitting right next to you when we told our daughters about our divorce. I know you're hurting, Frank. I know that because I'm hurting too. I burst out. Who gives a shit if you're hurting? I could give a damn what you're going through right now. You made this shitty bed, and we're all laying in it. So go find Doug, spread your legs, and ask him to piston you to 0 to 100. He was so helpful when you were getting over your husband. He provided a piston to slob on. I'm sorry. A nice shoulder to cry on when you needed help brushing me under the rug. I'm sure he can do the same thing to help you forget about the pain that you put your daughters through. We both put them through hell, Frank. We both had a part in this. Yeah, I worked too hard. You screwed my best friend. All is not created equal in here. You want to kid yourself, fine. But you must be on some serious drugs if you think I'm gonna play along with the "I was lonely" excuse. You're an a-hole, she said as she got up and stomped out of my office. At least I'm not a characterless cheater. I yelled out after she slammed the door. I didn't get a response, but I'm sure she heard me. Was I being childish? Sure. I could admit that. Did it feel good? No, not really. My adolescent behavior was just a way to vent my real frustration. The pain of looking your kids in the eyes and shattering their worlds is agony that can only be compared with similar pain. Getting shot, stabbed, or burned isn't even comparable. That night with Sandra, I took 2 steps forward in getting past the bitterness that I felt at Claire. Tonight, I took a giant leap backwards, and I had a running start. No longer was the betrayal about me. Now, it had spread. The curse of hiding the state of our marriage from our daughters until now was that we were also hiding it from ourselves. Anytime before now, we could call it quits and turn back. Sure, we'd be fractured. Probably never be the same loving couple that we had been. But we could have faked the funk long enough for the girls to mature. Now, there was no reason to turn around and go back. The damage was complete. The next day at work, I was called into a meeting with the heads again. I groaned out loud when Sarah gave me that bit of news. We already had a meeting not too long ago. What could they possibly want this soon? You need to calm down, Mr. Underwood. You know how they are. A bunch of pencil pushers. Don't let them see your frustration. Sarah told me, trying to calm me down. What else could they want? I just gave them a progress report. Nothing more has been done since then. God, why can't I just do the job and be left alone? She looked thoughtful for a moment and then leaned in. I don't think this is about the engine. She seemed as if she were holding on to a juicy bit of information, and she was debating on whether or not to spill the beans. Okay, I was intrigued. When it came to this company, the assistants are really the ones who ran everything. They talked amongst themselves. Sarah often knew things long before I did. What could this be about? I asked. She knew she had me on the hook, because she smiled slyly. Your old friend, Mr. Stamper. Doug. She nodded knowingly. From the smirk on her face and her demeanor, I wondered how much she actually knew about my situation. Previous to this, she didn't make any indication that she knew anything. She knew I was getting a divorce, because she pointed me in the direction of Terry, but I never shared the specifics with her. But now, she was speaking with me like we were co-conspirators against Doug. Did she know? How? Then again, how does she learn half of the shit that she knew? Why would they be meeting with me about him? Her voice lowered. I heard that he stole some secrets when he left. I think they want to sue him, or something like that. I'm not sure. I can't say that it hurt me to hear that Doug had a bit of bad luck coming his way. Shit, if I'm honest, it actually brightened up my day a little. Still, I couldn't imagine Doug doing that. It wasn't a question of his loyalty or his ethics. He had none of those. I just didn't think he was that stupid. Why would they question me about it? She shrugged her shoulders at me and looked like she was about to say something else, but then stopped. She looked past me, like someone was coming up behind me. Excuse me, I'm looking for a Frank Underwood. I heard from behind me. The voice was male, and he sounded young. I turned to find some IT-looking guy. I'm Frank. How can I help you? From the corner of my eye, I saw Sarah casually brush a strand of hair out of her face. She looked at this guy like a teenage girl does the hotshot quarterback for the high school. Hi, my name is Jason Morrison. I'm with company. We're contracted to do security upgrades. I was told to meet with you. Really? Since when are we getting a security upgrade? Well, we're the company that put your security system in 5 years ago. We've been doing the maintenance on it since then. According to this, he pulled out a piece of paper and read from it. You guys have also contracted us to perform several upgrades to your system. I'm the guy that is supposed to do the initial assessment. I vaguely remembered the new security system getting put in. I was the point of contact when it was installed, which is probably why he was looking for me now. I remembered speaking to some other guy though. An older, fatter guy. Wait a minute. I remember your company. The guy in charge was some ex-Navy guy who looked like he never missed a meal. The young guy chuckled. You mean Bernie? Yeah, he hasn't missed a meal. Ever. In fact, he eats several other people's meals when they turn their backs. I looked over at Sarah, who giggled at the joke like it was the funniest thing she'd heard since Kevin Hart was on Ellen. By now, she was practically scribbling Mrs. Sarah Morrison in her notebook with hearts around it. I almost expected her to start panting and whistling with her heart-shaped eyes popping out of her head like a cartoon wolf. Well, Jason, I'm glad to have you. I'm going to be terribly busy, and I won't be able to guide you around. He looked perplexed. That's going to be a problem. I'm actually going to need a point of contact. I'll be needing passwords, security logs, and a lot of other things. Once I get going, I'll be fine. My team will come in here and do the upgrades, and will practically be invisible. But for the first couple of days, I'll need someone who can point me in the right direction. The first couple of days? How long is this upgrade supposed to take? About a week. I saw one of the heads trying to get my attention. He had a serious expression on his face. Whatever they wanted me for, it wasn't good. Look, Mr. Morrison, I'm sure that my assistant Sarah here can get you anything you need. I have an urgent meeting to go, as well as a mountain of work to do. If she needs anything, she can give me a call. Is that okay with you, Sarah? Sure. I'll stick around to help him out. By the looks of things, she didn't seem to be inconvenienced one bit. Good. I'll be seeing you both later. With that, I made my exit. I almost laughed to myself. It kind of reminded me of when I first met Claire. Love. In the beginning, it starts off as mere infatuation. Fluttering of the eyes, sped up beating of the heart. So wonderful in the beginning, until it all turns to shit. I was ushered into the boardroom and seated before the heads. This meeting was definitely not for a progress report. Along with the normal players, I saw Terry and a couple of other lawyer types. Sitting before all of the major people in your company is intimidating enough. When they bring in a lawyer, then the anxiety gets amped up a notch. Good morning, Mr. Underwood. As you know, my name is Terrence Ross. The reason we are here is because we have a couple of questions about an old associate of yours, a Mr. Douglas Stamper. The two of you worked together for years before he left. You even became really good friends. Do you remember him? Terry knew damn well I remembered him. I'd spilled my entire story out to him, but I knew that he was only doing his job. Spelling things out was not only for me, but for all present, including the stenographer who was furiously typing away. Yes, I remember him. We did work together, and he was my friend. But I haven't spoken to him in several months now. Can I ask what this is about? I half expected Terry to bring up Doug's involvement in my divorce, but he didn't. He treated whatever this was, in my case, as if they were two separate entities. Do you recognize this? He asked as he slid a piece of paper over to me. I grabbed it and looked at for a brief second. It's a schematic, I said, as if everyone should have already known what it was. No one seemed blown away by my revelation. Thank you for that, Mr. Underwood, but I need you to take a second look at it. What is it a schematic of? I looked closer, and my heart almost dropped. Panic started to set in. I recognized this schematic. It was the one that Doug and I stole from that other intern when we were fighting for jobs here. The one for the new propulsion system. This was Donald's schematic. Shit, what is this doing here? I've probably seen this somewhere before, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Why are you asking me this? I asked nervously. This was not good at all. Past sins coming back to haunt me. Well, we believe that Mr. Stamper developed this system while he was employed here, using our equipment to do so. He patented the design, but it doesn't stop the fact that he came up with it using our resources. His company just released the plan to launch this new system later on this year, and Doug is the one who designed it. If this is true, then we can make a case about this system belonging to us. Wait a minute. Are you telling me that Doug developed this? Yes, and he got it patented not too long ago. This surprises you? I sat there flabbergasted for a moment. This wasn't about my sins. This was all about Doug. They wanted to know if Doug came up with this design while he worked here. But Doug didn't come up with the design at all. Donald did. We stole his design in an effort to keep him from having a leg up on us, but we never planned on using it. At least I didn't. The motive behind stealing it wasn't to use it for ourselves, but to keep him from being able to wow the company with it and clinch his spot. I assumed that after Doug and I were hired, that he would take his design to another company. But Doug was supposed to email it to him after things blew over. He did email it back, didn't he? I racked my brain, but I didn't actually witness Doug doing that. I just presumed he did because that was part of the plan. We just wanted to make it difficult for him to get to his work for the moment, not steal it altogether. But apparently, Doug had other ideas. He actually passed it off as his own. Now, the company wanted to know if I had any knowledge that Doug had designed it here. This left me with a huge moral dilemma. Do I screw over the man who screwed me over? Tough choice. I was about to open my mouth, but then stopped. Tougher choice. Do I screw him over, or royally screw him over? I could say that Doug came up with those designs while he worked here, or I could say that he stole them from Donald. One would get him sued. The other would probably get him blackballed from ever working again as an engineer. And then sued. Did I want that on my conscience? Doug, being forced to give up his career and face punishment for a crime that we both committed? I thought back to that morning when I was touching Claire's waist, then she called out his name. I also thought back to that day in Doug's office, when he self-righteously justified his betrayal, putting it off on me. I didn't deserve Claire, he said sanctimoniously when he professed his love for her. Apparently, I didn't deserve a best friend either. My conscience will be fine. I do recognize this schematic, Mr. Ross. But Doug didn't come up with this drawing when he was employed here. Another intern did. Doug stole this from him. I swear the entire room gasped collectively. No one, including Terry, expected that bit of information. So, you're telling us that Mr. Stamper stole this design from another employee that used to work here, went to another place of employment, and passed this off as his own? One of the heads asked. Terry eyed me with a bit of suspicion, but he didn't say anything. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. The stenographer was typing at warp speed. The clicking of her fingers as they punched our every word was constant. Who was this intern? Another one of the heads asked. His name was Donald. I don't remember his last name. Come to think of it, I never knew his last name. Did you witness Mr. Stamper stealing this schematic? Terry chimed in. He looked at me warily as he said this. I could see him trying to pass me an unspoken message, warning me to tread lightly. Yes, I saw him do it. I could see Terry wince involuntarily. The rest of the room muttered for a few seconds, and then fell silent. Just to be certain that we are understanding you correctly, let me repeat it back to you. You are saying that you are an eyewitness to the crime of Mr. Stamper stealing this schematic from an intern named Donald. Terry was choosing his words very carefully, emphasizing the ones that he wanted me to pay close attention to. Eyewitness and crime were the ones that his pitch and tone changed with when he said them. Yes, that is what I'm saying. Even through his professional demeanor, Terry fell slightly at that admission. I could tell he disapproved with my course of action, but he had a job to do, and I was on my own now. Tell us about the time you witnessed Mr. Stamper stealing this design, Terry said, returning to the lawyer that he was. His trained interrogation voice was unwavering and even. I decided to go with the truth. The only part of the story that I changed was that instead of both of us stealing the design, I just had Doug doing it. The entire time I was talking, Terry was taking notes. So, to reiterate, Terry said, reading from his notebook. You, Mr. Stamper, and Donald the intern decided to go out for drinks. The three of you became inebriated and drove to Donald the intern's place of residence. Then, Mr. Stamper steals this schematic that we have shown you by emailing it to himself and attempts to destroy the personal laptop of Donald the intern so that there is no evidence of its creation. Is this correct, Mr. Underwood? Yes, that's correct. Did you have knowledge beforehand that Mr. Stamper planned on stealing this design? This was a sticky one. So far, everything else has been the truth, with one detail changed. It flowed out so effortlessly because all I had to do was recount the events of that night. Doug did steal the design, so it was easy to simply tell the truth. However, this question posed a problem. If I said yes, then I make myself an accomplice. If I said no, then that could come back to haunt me. Undoubtedly, Doug would be questioned. When he was, all he would have to do is throw me under the bus with him. If I was found out to be telling a blatant lie, it could discredit me. I decided to go with the truth. Sort of. Yes, I knew he planned on stealing it. We were in competition for the remaining 2 jobs here. It was down to the 3 of us. When we learned that Donald was going to present this design as his ticket to one of those jobs, we knew that would clinch him a spot. Doug felt that between the 2 of us, he was the weakest candidate. So when we decided to go out for drinks, He told me that he planned to make it so that Donald didn't have the schematic to show you. I warned him not to do it, told him that we would find some other way to beat Donald. But he knew that once you guys saw that schematic, he was done for. So when we brought Donald back to his apartment, Doug started going through his laptop. I don't even know how he got past the passcode. I also didn't know that he planned to destroy the laptop, or that he was planning to pass off the design as his own. The nods all around showed that they believed me. Even Terry looked convinced. It was easy enough to pass off, because about 95% of it was true. Separating Donald from his designs isn't a crime. Having knowledge of that would get me a slap on the wrist. Destroying the laptop is a little more serious. I had to distance myself from that. Doug stealing the design and passing it off as his own, that was all his dumb mistake. Well, Mr. Underwood, thank you for your honesty. We will make contact with this Donald guy to corroborate your story, and we will make our decision. I know that it must be hard to testify against one that you call a friend. Even Terry almost cracked a smile on that one. But we thank you. He shot me a brief smirk, as if to say, you lucky son of a bitch. I returned his look with an innocent one that said, who, me? If we can use this to challenge the patent and get it revoked, we may be able to get that design for ourselves. We need to find this Donald guy immediately. If he has anything that could bring it into question, we can use that. One of the heads said. I could practically hear the wheels turning. Well, he emailed the design to himself. He may have used his company email address. I'm not sure. But if he did, that's a start, isn't it? I offered, trying to give whatever help I could. They nodded and mumbled some more. Hey, I just wanted justice for my company. That's all. My willingness to help out had nothing to do with sticking it to that snaky, backstabbing son of a bitch. Scout's honor. Who cares if I wasn't a Boy Scout? Tell me, Frank, could this be used to solve the current problems we are having with our engine? Another one asked me. I took a look at it and saw the possibilities. Maybe. I'm not sure. But if we got Donald on our team, I'm sure he'd be a big help. Anyone who could come up with this is sure to bring something else to the table. I saw smiles all around me. When it comes to making money, they will be nothing but smiles. Hell, they were practically jerking themselves off under the table. Stopping the development of one of our competitors was sure to equal big-time dollar signs for them. Taking a design that would have brought them to the next level and making it our own, Fei Ching. And I was the guy who placed the mouse in the tank with the python. About a week went by until I heard anything else about it. By this time, I had settled on making a bid for the townhouse that was close to my girls. I was afraid that if I moved to the condo that was closer to my job, then my predisposition to overwork would cause me to lose sight of what was really important. Out of sight, out of mind. But if I lived closer to my girls, then my feet would stay grounded. I would have to pass by my old house every morning on the way to work and coming back from work. That would be my daily reminder to make time for the two most precious things I own. Sometimes true strength is being honest about your weaknesses and heading them off. I was actually out with my girls at an amusement park when I got the phone call. Imagine my surprise when I saw my screen light up with Doug's name. My girls were inhaling sugar by the grams, eating crazy bread, and drinking a large soda, so I was able to slip away from the table. I knew this conversation had a high likelihood of not being kid-friendly. I went to a spot that was close enough for me to still watch them, but out of earshot so that I would be free to converse with the backstabbing a-hole without having to censor myself. What do you want, Doug? I asked curtly when I answered the call. You scumsucker. I know it was you that snitched about that schematic. Well. I guess the board reached out to him. I couldn't help it. I had to rub his face in it. Doug, you seem angry. Is there a problem? You're a backstabbing a-hole. You know that? No wonder your wife left you. Under normal circumstances, that would have made me angry. But now, knowing what was ahead for Doug, I felt calm. I saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to bait me from a fallen man. Hello, Pot, I said with an even tone. Huh? What the hell are you talking about? Come on, Doug. Do I really have to explain the whole pot calling the kettle black thing? Do you really want to compare notes on backstabbing? Besides, you were the one stupid enough to try to pass off someone else's work as your own. I just told them what I knew. We both did that, a-hole. You know it. You made it out to seem like I did it on my own. I didn't want to admit anything that could be used against me. With technology being what it was, he could have easily been recording. Still, I wanted to torture him. Doug. I laughed. Please don't bring me into your quicksand of stupidity. I didn't try to use stolen schematics to boost my career. I'm smart enough to do it with my own work. While you were busy seducing my wife, I was working. The two of you made that abundantly clear. If you had spent less time getting into Claire's pants and more time at your job, maybe you wouldn't have needed to sink so low. That design was the only reason that job hired me. You already had your promotion. I was just trying to get mine. His voice sounded anxious. I would have felt bad for him if I wasn't enjoying his misery so much. Well, you got it. Congratulations. Look at the bright side of all this, Doug. Now, you'll have a lot more time to tell Claire how wonderful she is. You don't have to worry about becoming a workaholic like me. Isn't that great? FR. He started to say something, but then he stopped himself. I think he decided to switch tactics, because when he spoke again, his voice was softer. He was practically pleading. Frank, please. This is my livelihood. I know you don't like me, but we used to be friends. You don't understand that this could follow me for life. I may not be able to get another job with this on my record. We can settle what I did to you another way. You're not this guy. You're not like me. Don't let my actions change who you are. You're better than me. Oh God, did he really sink to groveling? He must be desperate. I'm better than him? This was almost too good to be true. What I did next was cruel. I admit it, but in my defense, it felt great. Okay, you're right. I'll go talk to the board in the morning. I'll tell them that I made a mistake. We can settle things between us another way. The only thing I ask is that you stop seeing Claire. He was stunned for a moment. He was quiet so long I almost thought we got disconnected. What did you say? I'll tell the board that I made a mistake. I'll lie for you, but only if you stop seeing Claire. I could feel his heart drop on the other end of the phone. But you two are divorced, and you're the reason for it. You once told me that I didn't deserve Claire because I chose work over her. Now you get to make the same choice. You get to prove your claim that you are the better man for her than me. If you forfeit her, I'll save your job, or you can keep seeing her. The choice is yours. Was I actually planning on speaking to the board? Hell no, even if I wanted to. It was out of my hands now. The heads had that juicy steak in their mouths, and there was no way they were letting go. But I was curious. He pronounced his love for her. I wanted to see how deep that love actually ran. Are you actually using this to break us up? Really? That's low, Frank. You're not that low. I was tired of him trying to appeal to my benevolent nature to manipulate me to make things better for him. The first time it was funny. Now it was irritating. I wanted to burst his bubble. Doug, you screwed my wife. You took my family from me. So please, stop saying how much better than you I am. I already know that. I don't steal things that don't belong to me and try to make it my own. I do my own work. I got my own wife. You're a pathetic bottom feeder who can't get anything by himself. When we were interns, both of us knew that you were the one in danger of not landing the job. Don't pretend like it's not true. So now, I'm giving you the chance to make a choice. To man up and actually sacrifice for what you really believe in. So, dump Claire, keep your job, or not. The choice is yours. Frank. Tick-tock, Doug. Tick-tock. Things fell quiet once again. I could practically hear him deliberating on the other end. As the seconds passed, I actually thought he would choose Claire. Then finally, he softly said, "Okay, you win." What was that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you over the hypocrisy. You'll have to speak up. You win, a-hole. Okay, I'll give up Claire. Are you happy? A sinister smile spread across my face. You see there? That wasn't so hard. Apparently, you don't deserve Claire either. You're a stupid scumsucker, Frank. I know, so are you. I want you to think about that when you're jobless. What? Please. You didn't actually think I would help you, did you? God, you really are stupid. Have a nice life, Doug. Don't ever call me again. You mother. I ended the call with the biggest smile on my face. Then I strolled over to my daughters. So, who's up for more rides? Me. Their happy squeals greeted me as they rushed over. Each one grabbed a hand as they dragged me away from the eating area toward the rides. Today was such a beautiful day. Weeks went by, pulled along by my kids, my job, and the back and forth battle of closing on the townhouse. I was in a bidding war with a young couple who were expecting twins. They were just starting out. They even had a dog. How quaint. They had their hearts set on the townhouse. It was exactly like the one the wife grew up in. I could sympathize with that bit of nostalgia. But for me, I was fighting for my girls. I didn't want to turn into the absentee dad that I once was. For me, this house was a first step. I had chosen this house to be closer to my girls rather than the condo that was closer to my job. The symbolism of that alone made this place priceless to me. They were determined. But so was I. So I upped my bid by another couple of $1,000s. I was prepared to go higher still. Even if I paid more than the house was worth, I would be getting my money's worth. One evening I was sitting in my office, eating a meal that Claire had prepared. It was good. One thing that I would definitely miss was her cooking. When we first married, she didn't even know how to boil eggs. I'm exaggerating, but her cooking skills left a lot to be desired. Over time, she gathered recipes from the internet, random cookbooks, and from other stay-at-home ladies. She was determined to be a good wife and a good mother. Now, she was a whiz in the kitchen. I found it odd that she still cooked for me, even though we were divorced. I guess it wasn't too odd, seeing that I still lived in the same house for the time being. Still, one would expect for her to cut off all wifely duties to the husband that she no longer loved. "Frank, can we talk?" I heard her say a moment after the creak of my office door let me know that someone was opening it. "Sure," I said as I placed my plate on the desk and turned around in my seat. Claire entered my office and sat down on my couch-cum-bed. She seemed to be trying to say something, but nothing was coming. Then, she started stammering. God, this is hard. I had a whole speech planned. I sat confused for a moment. "Just say what you want to say." Tears started streaming down her face. "I just wanted to tell you how sorry I am. For everything. I screwed everything up." She sat there and cried for a moment. I grabbed some hand tissues from out of a box on my desk and handed them to her. She used them to wipe her nose. I know I was wrong for what I did with Doug. I knew it then. I was just so unhappy that I stopped thinking about what it would do to my family. I just wanted to do something that would make me feel better. It was a mistake the first time. We got too drunk, and then I nodded. I didn't want to hear the rest of that statement. But after that, I just thought it could be short fling. Something to get me through. I trusted him because I knew him so well. He was nice to me. Easy to talk to. I thought that you didn't want me, so there was no harm. Then, he told me that loved me. Things got all messy after that. "Because you fell in love with him too?" She nodded and cried some more. I let that digest. Not really what she said, but how it affected me. Better yet, how it didn't affect me. The searing pain that would have been there months ago at that statement simply wasn't there. When I realized that I loved him, the unhappiness that I felt with you grew. But to tell you the truth, I still loved you. I didn't really plan on leaving you. That night that I told you I was unhappy, I planned on telling you that I was having an affair and that we should try to work on our marriage. I didn't want to break up the family, but it came out wrong. Things got twisted. In the end, I just went along with it. You'll have to excuse me if I find that a little hard to believe, Claire. You say you didn't plan on leaving me, but if I recall, I asked you if you wanted to stay with me. She sniffled again. I know, and the truth of the matter was that I would have fought for the marriage for the kids' sake if you would have, but I was also okay with it ending. I thought about that for a moment. I tried recalling our conversations to see if that rang true. It could have, but then again, who knows? You didn't say that. I don't know if it would have changed our paths any, with you having slept with my best friend, but it could have. Now we'll never know. She nodded sadly and wiped her nose again. Yeah, I know, but I wanted to tell you how sorry I am for everything. You didn't deserve that. No matter what you did, you deserved better than that. I regret the choices that I made. I handled our marriage like an adolescent. If I could do one thing over, it would be coming to you before I made the choice to cheat with Doug, trying to make you understand how I was feeling, suggesting counseling or something like that. I'm not certain it could have saved us, but I owed it to our marriage and our kids to try. I just wanted to say that to you. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And it did. For the first time, I felt that she really understood what she did to me. Of course, she could never really know how it felt unless it happened to her. Having your heart ripped out by two trusted friends is a feeling that can't be compared. But she at least understood the depths of her betrayal. In the end, that's all I can ask for. She can't make up for what she put me through. But most of the time, all we really want is for someone to hear us. To really take a look outside of themselves and see what we see. If I may ask, what brought about this change, Heart? She shrugged her shoulders. I don't know. When I first read our divorce papers, I couldn't escape the fact that it was my doing. When we had to tell the girls, I felt that same feeling. I came to you that night to talk to you, and you threw it in my face. I get it though. I was angry with myself, so I knew you must have been furious with me. I just thought it was time for me to own up to my part and to not make excuses anymore. I won't be able to get past this and forgive myself if I don't. You know? I nodded in agreement. Yeah, I was there once too. When I realized how much I neglected you and the girls. She smiled at me through her tears. Yeah, you've been trying really hard. I recognize that, and I'm so happy for you. Our girls are loving the extra attention. You're a great dad. Even when you were gone all of the time, you were still a loving father. Yeah, and even though you were a cheating bitch, you were a good mother to our girls. We may have been shitty spouses, but we have to pat ourselves on the back for those too. They are living proof that we aren't complete screw-ups." She laughed at that, and then she stood up and grabbed my hand, pulling me up from my chair. We ended up hugging. I believe that was the moment I began to forgive her, truly forgive her. I realized that I was healing. I didn't feel anything when she told me that she fell in love with Doug. No anger, no hurt, just a sense of nostalgic remorse for what was once a happy marriage. A woman that I was once in love with. Now, she was the mother of my kids. For that, I will always care about her. She will always be in my life. "Morning, Sarah," I said as I breezed past her. "Morning, Mr. Underwood," she said cheerily. Her smile was spread from ear to ear. Sarah was naturally a cheery person, but this morning she seemed to have something extra. I had to stop and ask, "Sarah, you seem to be glowing particularly brightly today. What has you so happy?" She beamed as she looked up from her computer. "Oh, nothing. Just went out on a date last night. Now I was interested." "A date? With who?" "No one from here, I hope. You're way too good to be dating one of these nerds." She giggled like a giddy schoolgirl. "No, I went out with Jason." "Jason? Are you talking about the security upgrade guy?" I asked, surprised. She smiled broadly and nodded vigorously. I saw every last one of her teeth. "I take it went well." What I didn't know was that statement was the opening that she was looking for. She told me practically everything. He used to be in the Navy, was divorced, had a daughter, and apparently was skilled in the bedroom. She didn't tell me the last part. She didn't have to. Judging by the smile on her face when she said that he cooked breakfast for her, it didn't take a person of my genius to do simple math. "Well, I'm happy for you. You really deserve it." I meant it. Sarah was a great woman. Over the years, I'd come to depend on her. I tend to get so engrossed in the engineering side of things that if it were left up to me, everything else would fall apart. On top of that, she always had a bright disposition that radiated throughout the office. "Thank you, boss. And, if I may, I wanted to say that I am truly sorry for how things turned out for you. I respect how you've handled things. Most people would have become a tyrant to everyone around him, but you didn't. You knew about my situation? With Doug?" She nodded. "Of course I did. I didn't talk about it with you because you didn't seem to want to discuss it. I tried to keep people who would bombard you with questions about it at a distance. I had to have a talk with your intern, though. He kept stupidly bringing your wife up. For a genius, that Thomas can be a real dummy. You know, one of these days we're gonna have a discussion about exactly how it is that you always know what's going on." She winked and smiled sinisterly. "I'll never tell." I made my way down to the lab to check on the latest developments of the engine. We've been making progress in solving the problems, but not enough so that there was anything to report. I was pleased with my team's dedication, but I was disappointed that we weren't making any headway. However, I was excited to see if the heads could actually get the patent revoked for that design. If they could, and we could get Donald and it on the team, then things would get really interesting. The rest of the day was filled with adjustments, test runs, more adjustments, and more test runs. Before I knew it, it was about 8 o'clock. I had to get home in time to see my girls before they went to bed. As I made my way to the parking lot towards my car, I felt someone behind me. I turned just in time to get tackled and thrown to the ground. "You backstabbing a-hole. You ruined my life." I heard as I was punched over and over again. Surprisingly, the punches didn't hurt. I think they were supposed to land on my face, but they just kept hitting my ear and bouncing off. I was able to protect myself and push him off of me. I scrambled to my feet and I found Doug breathing heavily with his fists still clenched. Rage and fire filled his eyes as his nostrils flared like a bull. "You maggot. Donald is suing me for stealing his work, and your company is using him to revoke the patent. They are giving him a job at your company. In exchange, he is going to give them the design. My design. This is all your fault." With that, he lunged at me again. I know this is the part where I tell you that I effortlessly used my secret kung fu skills to render him unconscious. A swift Jason Statham move delivered with smooth accuracy and bone-crunching results. Then I stand over him with my foot on his chest and say some snarky one-liner with a British accent. But no, I'm not a fighter. Neither is Doug. We're a couple of middle-aged engineers who had never actually been in a real fight. However, there is a lot to be said about a man with pin-up rage. A man who's had to suppress his baser instincts of violence and revenge for months, swallowing the urge to let go and release the beast. A man who was forced to ignore the need to release all of the anger, hurt, pain, and humiliation that was heaped upon him by one who was close enough to his heart to nearly kill him with grief. Then, the object of his wrath shows up, with nothing in between them but an open parking lot and a whole lot of hostility. Like a gift-wrapped treasure from Santa, nice and pretty under the tree. Almost sounds like there is a God after all. So, while a man may not be fighter, the concept is simple enough for him to figure out. Fist goes here. All he needs is the right motivation to do so. That I had, in droves. So I hit him, again and again, and it felt marvelous. But, with every action comes an opposite reaction. The yin to the yang. There is a reason why smart people don't fight. There is a flip side to it. Hitting a person is awesome. Anyone who tells you that it hasn't been angry enough to need that release. However, getting hit, not so awesome. In movies like The Transporter, the bad guy gets hit one time, falls off screen, and isn't seen again until the camera pans to show him and his buddies unconscious. In real life, when you hit a guy, he hits you back, and it hurts. When I was balled up on the ground, my face was somewhat protected from the blows. I think that filled me with a false confidence. When I was standing, those hits didn't quite bounce off as painlessly. So we fought. Mano a mano. A couple of middle-aged nerds, duking it out in the parking lot over a woman and a long-time friendship thrown in the toilet. Each of us threw punches filled with hurt and regret, trying to make the other feel what we felt by translating those emotions into physical pain. The fight may have lasted 5 minutes, tops. The two of us were so out of breath though, you would have thought that we were Hector and Achilles, Troy reference. Next thing I knew, security was pulling us apart. Doug was irate. The guard who was restraining him had to practically pin him to the ground to get him to stop. The guard who was holding me back saw that I was the calmer of the two and warned me to stay put. Then he went assist his partner with the hostile one. Did I feel better? Yeah, a little. Violence doesn't solve everything, but does solve some things. Sometimes, civility doesn't work. Check the history books, or just look up any war. But most importantly, there are times when violence just feels good. If it didn't, guys would only watch romantic comedies when they went to the movies. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman would try to talk to Doomsday, get him to open up. Jason Bourne would have a civilized meeting with the spies trying to kill him. Kenny Rogers had it right. Sometimes, you have to fight when you're a man. Every once in a while, a man just needs to knuckle up. My face hurt, and I probably will have some swelling in my right hand, but I did feel like I needed to get that out. I know that sounds like machismo bullshit. It probably is. But at that moment, I felt like the victor. Adding to my delight was watching the guards manhandle Doug while he shouted obscenities at me. It was oddly funny. It was humorous enough to keep me from doing anything stupid, like running over there and trying to continue this fight. For me, my fight with Doug was over. Seeing my amused face only enraged him more, which made him act more irrationally. This in turn made them have to use more force on him, which only added to the humor and my entertainment. A vicious cycle. In the end, he only calmed down when they told him that they would have him arrested if he didn't leave immediately. So he was forced to leave with his tail between his legs. They further warned him that they saw him on the property again, they would have him arrested for trespassing. Damn, how's that for karma? There was a time when the shoe was on the other foot. I was about to be arrested for going to his house and his office to confront him about stabbing me in the back. He had home court advantage then. Now, funny how life works. A month later, I won an entirely different kind of fight. I won the bidding war. I wound up paying close to $10,000 over the asking price, but it was worth it. I was the proud new owner of a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom townhouse. It wasn't as big as the house that I shared with Claire and my girls once upon a time, but it was the most beautiful thing I'd seen in a while. There wasn't much of a front yard, but the backyard that I shared with my next-door neighbor was pretty decent. Plus, there was a really nice park right down the street. There was even a new bike trail that was just built. It led all of the way down to the beach. After I closed on the house, the keys were handed to me. The house belonged to me. Moving day was actually bittersweet. I was excited to finally end this chapter of my life and start the new one, yet I was nervous about what lay ahead. Luckily, I had a friend to help me through it. Terry was helping me load up the things that Claire and I packed. I wouldn't go as far as to say that we were going to be lifelong buddies, but he is the one person who understood where I was coming from. Granted, he played a bit more of an active role in marriage's demise, but that doesn't do anything to quell the feeling of being cast aside. If anything, it amplifies it, because you know that it was your fault. Plus, he was a daily reminder to me that I wasn't as bad of a husband as he was. Hey, I'm still human. We can have our selfish motives about things. So, this is it. Claire said when I'd moved the last box into the moving truck. Her eyes misted up a little, but no tears were falling yet. Yep, I'm finally out of your hair. A tear finally came down her cheek. Yay. She joked weakly as she wiped it quickly. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the Claire I married all of those years ago. I missed her, but life changes people. That Claire wasn't here anymore. Neither was the man who married her. Too many things have happened to bridge that gap. Now, the two people standing here were older, wiser, and better versions of themselves than the two who first married. But their journey together had ended. You know, Claire, I just realized that I never once apologized to you. After everything that happened, I got so caught up in you and Doug that I didn't stop to think that you needed an apology from me. Well, it's an understandable oversight, considering. She looked down and shifted from side to side as her thoughts plagued her. I lightly grabbed her chin and lifted it until she was looking me in the eyes. Claire, I'm sorry for neglecting you all of those years. You deserved a better husband. The tears really started streaming down her face then. I grabbed her in for a hug. She embraced me, crying on my shoulder. Well, at least you don't have to worry about the toilet seat being left up. I joked to lighten the mood. She gave a weak laugh as we let each other go. She walked with me to the driver's side of the truck. We stood there for a moment. It looked like she was about to say something, but she stopped herself a few times. Then she finally said, Frank, you can't cook worth shit. I don't want you starving to death over there. Since you're right down the street, I wouldn't mind if you came over to eat sometimes. She said as she watched me anxiously. I didn't respond right away, so she quickly added, It would be good for the girls? I don't think that would be a good idea. The last thing either of us need is for me to come over for dinner to find Doug there. That wouldn't be good for anyone, especially Doug. Oh, you don't have to worry about Doug. He and I are no longer seeing each other. That was a bit of news. I couldn't say that I was upset at hearing it. What happened, if you mind me asking? No, it's fine. Me and Doug were kinda doomed from the start. I mean, I do love him, and I believe that he loves me. But we didn't do ourselves any favors by starting things out like we did. Then, when things started going bad with his patent, he became filled with so much anger and hatred towards you. Not to mention the two of you pinheads acting like Mayweather and Pacquiao, behaving like a couple of juvenile delinquents. I was Mayweather. I joked. Her face twisted into a playful smirk. What? Obnoxious and full of himself? Ha ha. Hilarious. Have you gotten funnier since we divorced? Whatever, slugger. Anyway, it's really put a strain on things. I just can't have that kind of negativity around the girls. You know? You are their father, and they love you. I don't think he can accept that and become a conducive to our lives. She started crying, and I grabbed her in for another hug. Her arms wrapped around my back as she squeezed me. When we finally let go, she wiped her tears again. I know that this is gonna sound self-serving, but you did the right thing. Doug isn't the guy for you. I know that you feel that he was there for you, but trust me on this. You're right when you say that your relationship was doomed from the start. Everything about it built on him helping you get over me. All he had to do was be the complete opposite of me. I honestly don't think the two of you actually knew each other. I remembered the choice that I gave Doug, and what he ended up choosing. I could have brought that up to her, but she didn't need that right now. I hate to admit this, but Doug and I are more alike than you think. There's a reason why we were best friends. She smiled sadly and nodded her head. Thanks, Frank. I know you mean well, but that doesn't help. I silently nodded and said no more. I just brushed my hand across her cheek before I opened the door and got into the truck. I turned the ignition and the engine rumbled to life. Don't forget about dinner. It's an open invitation, she said before I closed the door. I smiled and nodded. She took a step back as I pulled the heavy metal door shut and then put the truck in drive. I watched as Claire waved goodbye and I drove off to my new home. After we get you moved in, you owe me a beer, Terry said from the passenger side. Sure thing, Terry. Why don't we go get that beer in a place full of TNA? Want to go to Mario's? Thinking of Mario's made me think of Sandra. It had been a few months since I last saw her. That night at IHOP was still ingrained in my memory. I thought about her from time to time. Nah, I'm not in the mood for that. I know a good sports bar though. Lead the way. The truth was, I couldn't go to Mario's and see Sandra wearing a starlet costume. I really couldn't watch Terry or anyone else drool all over her. I knew that person was a fake. The flirtatious sex kitten wasn't who she was. I felt a connection with her the first night I met her, but that was built on the facade of starlet. The real connection that I made was when I sat with her in that restaurant, watching her devour her plate. or when I was back in the room, crying my eyes out. That was who intrigued me. The real Sandra was a complex creature who hid behind a stone-cold mask. But she wasn't stone-cold. A stone-cold person wouldn't have held a complete stranger while he bawled over his ex-wife, or listened as that stranger told her all that he was going through. No, a person who does that has a good, caring heart. A heart that had probably been broken one time too many and had to retreat into a shell to protect itself. Yet, it still cares. It can't help it, despite itself. James, if that's you by my car, you better just walk away. If I have to call Bruno out here, things will go very badly. Trust me, that never ends well. Starlet's voice shouted out into the darkness of the parking lot. I held my hands up in the air in surrender. Sandra, I'm sorry for scaring you. It's me, I said quickly, hoping that she recognized my voice. Frank? Yeah. I saw her visibly relax as she walked over to me. What the hell are you doing, lurking around my car? It was dark outside, seeing that it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, but the streetlights as well as the illumination provided by Mario's large, ostentatious, glowing neon sign provided enough visibility that I could make out her face. I didn't know of any other way to see you. Who the hell is James? I swear that I saw a hint of a smile start before the scowl returned. No one important. Why didn't you just come inside of the club? I nervously stuck my hands in my pockets. I don't know. I guess I didn't want to see Starlet. I wanted to see you. Frank. No, Sandra. Just hear me out, okay? She stopped whatever she was about to say and nodded. Look, I feel something for you. I don't know what it is, but it's something. You were there for me when I needed you. Frank. Don't interrupt, because I know what you're gonna say. You don't do the girlfriend experience. You aren't built that way. Or some other excuse that you tell yourself to keep other people out. But those are lies, Sandra. You know it. She didn't say anything. I waited for her to respond, but I got nothing. Then, she just brushed past me and started to get into her car. So, you're just gonna walk away? She spun around and glared at me, her face filled with venom. Yes. I'm going to walk away because I know how this story ends. Tell me, what do you see for us? A sweet courtship with roses and intimate dinners? Love making in the moonlight after a romantic date? Becoming boyfriend and girlfriend? Then what? You wake up in the morning and go to work. When you come home from work, that's when I'll go to my job. Here, giving lap dances, grinding on men and getting groped, having men throw dollar bills at me for a peek of my tits. And then I come home, crawl in bed with you, and laugh as we talk about our hard days at work. Is that what you see for us? I stood there quietly for a moment, letting all of that sink in. She continued, Are you going to introduce me to your parents? Your kids? What will you tell them about me? How we first met? I've been down this road, Frank. It doesn't end well. Not for me. So yes, I'm going to walk away. I suggest you do the same. She got into her car and started it up. Just before she could back out of the parking space, I jumped in her way. Get the hell out of the way, Frank, she yelled out of her window. I stood my ground until she angrily got out of her car and stalked over to me. Sandra, look, I don't know the answer to those questions. Okay, but I feel something for you. You feel it too. If you didn't, you wouldn't be so angry right now. All I want is to get to know you. That's all. We don't have to date. We can just be friends. But I want to see you some kind of way. She stopped and glared at me for a moment. Then she crossed her arms and looked off to the side. I didn't say anything more. I just let her think. She was still standing here instead of calling Bruno to come out and kick my butt. So I knew I didn't have to say anything else. God, you're annoying, she finally spit out. Sue, is that a yes? I asked tentatively. She didn't answer. She just uncrossed her arms, reached in her pocket and grabbed her cell phone. Then she put in her passcode and handed it to me. Put your phone number in before I change my mind. Really? Yes, hurry up. It's already changing. I smiled as I grabbed it from her and did as she asked. Her demeanor had softened some. I could tell. She still wasn't smiling, but the anger that she felt a moment ago was gone. She stood there, with her hand on her hip, but there was no irritation in her countenance. You promised to call me? I asked as she snatched the phone from my hands. She just turned around and walked back to her car. Stop being a little girl. I'll call you. Now move out of the way before I run you over, she said over her shoulder right before she got into her car. I moved out of the way and let her back up. She passed me as she backed up. Then she stopped going in reverse and put the car into drive. However, she didn't speed off right away. I saw her shoot me a look. It wasn't a smile, exactly, but the look lingered for a moment longer than normal. It wasn't Starlet looking at me. Not the cold bitch or the sarcastic woman. It was Sandra, one of those rare glimpses of the girl inside. But she caught it, looked out of her windshield, and drove off into the night. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.